All right, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to episode 19. Before we get into episode 19, today's a special day for certain people. The United States Marine Corps. If you haven't heard, which you must be living on the moon if you haven't heard from a Marine or seen something. But today, we'd like to wish, before we start the podcast, a happy 247th birthday to the United States Marine Corps. We got a cake here, special for them. It's a very special cake. We're going to post where we got it from. It's kind of an inside joke here, but we want to just have, before we start off, happy birthday. And then for all the Marines, all this past week of us making fun of you, you guys are probably used to it, but I just want to apologize, but it was all in good fun. Happy birthday. The real fun starts tomorrow on Veterans Day. But again, I would, for all my Marine friends out there, happy birthday, 247th birthday. And actually, Josh messed up. He didn't catch the one error that says episode 18, but it's actually episode 19. He failed on us today. So we'll get started. If you guys tuned in to last couple weeks ago's episode, you'll see a guy that looks very familiar to the other guy that was on before. Today we have his twin brother. We hear the better brother. Depends on who you talk to, right?
That's correct.
They both have their strengths and weaknesses, right? So
Correct.
Today we're joined with another member of the Specialist Mafia, right? The other specialist part of the Fulmer.
The senior ranking member.
Senior, yeah, he actually, I don't know what that says because he was in a couple years earlier and he had the same rank as Otto. So we'll poke at him a little bit. But we have David Fulmer, United States Army, is joining us, and you'll see it's gonna be interesting. A lot of the same things because you guys are twins. You know what I mean? Grew up in the same place. We'll go on that, but and actually some other similarities that are actually pretty cool when you look about it. So we'll start off with our first quote for the night. Effective communications have always been vital to military forces. Commanders must be able to maintain control over their units in order to fight successfully. And that's a quote from Rebecca Robbins Rains. My dogs upstairs don't like that quote, evidently, so sorry about that. And again, with the communications quote, you can kind of figure that David was communications. That's what you went in originally, right? 31 Charlie?
I did. I went in as a radio teletape operator in a air defense artillery unit.
So for some of the younger people, explain a teletype.
So basically my job, I was trained to be in the back of what they called a rat rig, which was a tin can on the back of a pickup truck that was enclosed with a typewriter that was basically tied to the radio system and was encrypted. And we would send messages back and forth. We also had radio equipment as well. But we had a life expectancy if we went into battle of like 30 seconds or a minute or something like that. But once I trained on that, never saw that equipment again.
That's a kind of a trend we're hearing with some of the Ohio National Guardsmen here, but back in the day. So obviously, like I said, there's some similarities that are pretty easy. You're born and raised in Steubenville with your brother.
Yeah, born in Columbus and moved to Steubenville when we were 2 in 1972. We moved there when our father became a manager of a large department store there.
Cool. And then as much as Otto tried to make you seem like you were struggling in school, you guys both did graduate at the same time, 1988.
We did. He was 100% truthful when he said that he graduated at the top and I graduated at the bottom. I was not a fan of high school. It was boring to me. And so I spent most of my time outside of playing baseball was spent at the volunteer fire department as a volunteer.
Right. And you started pretty early on that, and we'll talk about that later in your career. You're one of those guys that has, serving on both home fronts. Not that, other civilian jobs aren't as important, but you actually were kind of, you gave away as a fireman for a long time. So you unlike your brother, you manned up before Desert Storm, right? You enlisted in high school in 1987.
I did. My senior year of high school, I went down to the recruiter right before my 18th birthday and signed the papers and served from September of 87 until I went to basic in 1988.
Right, and then a little bit different than your brother, which you finally separated from him.
Right, I was the first of 4 siblings to leave the nest.
Oh, interesting. So so we asked your brother, what was your family's? You have a long history for the people who didn't listen to the last episode. You have a lot of people in your family. Your grandfather served in World War II. Your father was the Ohio Army National Guard as well, right?
Correct. Yeah,
and then you had
I had most of my uncles served either in the Army or the Air Force. My brother, of course, me, my brother, and then our brother-in-law also served. And I have a son who currently serves and a daughter who served until the Army in their infinite wisdom medically discharged her for asthma, which she didn't have.
Infinite wisdom, military. Imagine that.
Yeah.
But like we asked Otto a couple weeks ago, like what was your feel from your parents when you decided to join from a family that has a lot of heritage in the military? Were they excited? Was mom? Because Otto made it sound like your mom was a little upset about him joining.
I remember the conversation vividly when I approached my parents about joining, and my mom's like, absolutely not. And I was much more like my father, a rebellious one than Otto was. And we were sitting at the kitchen table, and my mom says, absolutely not. I'm not going to sign the papers. And I'm like, well, in 2 more months, I'll sign them on my own because I'll be 18. And so she really didn't have a say in it. Growing up, we knew that our grandfather served. We knew that our father served, but there was no real mention of it, no pressure to, hey, you should do this or you should do that. I saw it as a means of giving back, because that was my whole focus as a volunteer firefighter and something that I wanted to do in life. I had no ambition to go to college. And then it really saved me from going down a path that would have been bad.
Right.
I really needed the discipline and the focus, or quite frankly, I probably would have been in jail.
So you're that like 90s person that came, or late 80s, early 90s, that they would tell the stories like either join the Army or end up in jail.
Yeah,
I'm finally meeting one. Finally,
yeah, I was bored. I make no bones about it. Volunteer firemen, we drank all the time. So I've raised herds of Clydesdales I've never met my junior and senior year of high school. And it was either continue down that path or find a way to be a contributing member of society. So the National Guard was that focus, and then that led to me going to college, which I had no intent of ever doing.
Which you did. We'll talk about later eventually. But so you talked about being a volunteer fireman. You started doing that, I think, in 1984, if I remember right.
I did. I was 14 years old. We lived about a third of a mile from the fire station. No family in the fire service, no immediate family. And from the time I was little, growing up watching Emergency with Johnny and Roy, my mom said that's all I ever talked about. So at the ripe age of 14, you could join as a cadet and volunteer. And where we grew up, they were really hurting for members. And we were able to go to the training. And at 16, which you tell people this today, and they say you're crazy, but at 16, we were going in fighting fires. And I can vividly recall, and Otto was on the department for a while.
He couldn't hack it, though, because he's harassing, I think.
Well, actually, I fired him. And he'll be the one to say, how do you fire somebody from a volunteer fire department? Well, I was in charge of the cadets, and I had pretty high training standards, and him and a couple other people that their focus was sports, and it wasn't really towards the fire service. We kind of rooted them out. But I vividly remember my father dropping Otto and I off and watching us jump on the back of a fire truck, because in those days we rode the tailboard, and my father watching his 2 14-year-old sons go down the road at 50, 60 miles an hour hanging on the back of a fire truck.
I think that's crazy, because I remember guys in high school that were volunteer firemen, but that was the high school. I can imagine like a 16. I don't know what's more frightening, being a 16-year-old running into the fire, or being at the fire and seeing a 16-year-old running into the fire. But I mean, it was a different. I guess it was always a different time. We say that, but it was. I wonder what, like, now that wouldn't fly now. Right?
No, they have cadet programs, but some of the high school programs, they can go in as junior and senior and get certifications, but to actually get on a fire department and have an operational capacity, you're going to have to at least be 18 years of age.
So you do that for your whole time in high school, it seems like.
I did.
For like a third of your life, it seemed like, at that point already. So you graduate. So you go to basic training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina.
I do. I didn't know I didn't put 2 and 2 together. The day I left was D-Day, June 6th, in 1988. And I didn't have an appreciation for what that day meant, even though after that, after high school, I really became a history buff, but I really didn't put 2 and 2 together until a couple of years later that I was leaving on a very important day in American history. And so I reported to Fort Jackson and was there until August. One of the best times of my life. I tell people the camaraderie between the military and the emergency services is very similar. And while it's been 33, 34, 35 years, I'm not good with math, but I haven't seen a lot of those people, and I think the veterans here will attest. You could run into those individuals and pick back right in line with where you left off. I die with those guys.
100%. I went to military school and we graduated. I graduated in '94. So the same guys, there's a chat we talk about all the time. And one of them texted me about an hour ago. So yeah, it's the same thing. You always form that bond together. And we'll talk later. I think that's one of the bonds that we strive for the rest of our lives. And unfortunately, sometimes we find it, and a lot of times we don't. And I think that's what caused a lot of us to go into a spiral that a lot of people that haven't ever served really don't understand. So went from AIT to Fort Gordon. I mean, went from basic to AIT at Fort Gordon. Never been to Fort Gordon.
Fort Gordon was a beautiful base. The only annoying thing about Fort Gordon was where I did most of my training. Right above us was the class for Morse code. So you'd have to listen to the dee-dee-da-da-da, and the guys and gals that were training for Morse code would come out on break, and they'd sit there and dee-dee-da-da-da, and they'd be rehearsing that stuff, and it would drive you crazy.
I think my dad is responding to over there the Morse code. He's probably the only one here that knows it. It's I don't know what you just said to him, but he got all excited. It's ears perked up or something. But it's just funny to hear those MOSs or the skills that people were doing back then. And I wonder if they probably still teach it. It's some place Morse code probably.
Sure.
You'd think so. But that's just funny to.
Yeah, but Fort
two
Gordon,
things, Morse code and teletype.
Yeah. Luckily, I didn't have to do Morse code. It would have driven me nuts. But Fort Gordon was gorgeous. I learned to water ski on one of my few weekend passes. Almost drowned because I kept forgetting to let go of the rope when you hit the water. And that only makes you a very inefficient trolling lure. So that wasn't much fun. But I can remember one time we'd have to get marched from our classroom to the chow hall. And I love helicopters. That's really what I wanted to do in the military. And we're marching.
Sorry about that. But Jason is a crew chief. He's here, and he just gave me the funniest look. Like everybody loves helicopters.
Yeah, well, we were marching back from the classroom to the chow hall one day, and there on the parade field are about 12 Apaches, and I had never seen an Apache. So I'm looking at the Apaches and tripped over the person in front of me, which was like a bowling pin effect, and got chewed out for watching the helicopters.
Pay attention to marching, Fulmer. What are you doing?
But it was very cool.
That is nuts. So, like a lot of the Ohio National Guardsmen, after AIT, you come back, right?
Yeah, I came back, and I was with the 2nd on 174th ADA Battalion. The main unit was in Cambridge, but the detachment was in Steubenville. And to illustrate how antiquated it was, we had 40 millimeter dusters. So if you don't know what that is, it's 40 millimeter guns on a tank body, and the guns pulsate. They were World War II era.
You're making us look really old, dude. By the way.
And so we still had the Willys Jeeps.
So cool.
Got to drive those, but I never saw another piece of equipment that I was trained on in AIT. Pretty much the entire time I was in the National Guard.
So for the MOS you chose, 31 Charlie, is there a reason you chose that, or was it just to stay close to the job you had in Ohio? What was that?
I didn't want to be a tanker. I didn't want to be on a duster. So they had openings in communications. So it was either that or the other.
Okay. Did you ever think about going active duty, or was it just always reserves?
No,
National Guard. I'm sorry.
When I got back from AIT, and for those that have never been in, and to tell. For somebody to say they don't indoctrinate you is they're full of hooey, because the first month I was back, I couldn't sleep. My dad would wake up at 3:00 in the morning. I'm shining my boots. And I don't want to say the only saving grace, because I look back at it now, I wish I would have made the military my career, because days when you get legally paid to kill other people is a good day most days.
Yeah, nice pension. It's good too.
But I was having a real hard time adjusting back to civilian life. So I wish I would have made it my career. But at that time in the National Guard, you had a 6-month cooling off period where you could not, they weren't going to let you go active duty. You had to cool off. And by that time, I knew I had college paid for. The only thing that I had an interest to go to college for was something fire and EMS related, and that's what I did. But hindsight being 2020, I really wish I would have made the military my career as an enlisted person, or after college got a commission and went that route.
I didn't mean to laugh, but I'm pretty sure it's your brother. We had a quote or a comment a few minutes ago. It said, "Adjust the lighting. The glare in his forehead is skewing the view." So I'm pretty sure that's your brother. Poking,
I'm sure it is, but
bitch.
in my defense, I don't have a comb over. So there's that.
These guys are quick at each other. I like them. I'm hoping it's him. It's not somebody else picking on it. Then we're going to have to, it has to definitely be your brother. But so you talked about, 88 now. You talked about not going to college, but you mentioned it was paid for. So you decided to actually go to college. 1989, you started to attend the University of Akron.
I did. So I got back in October of '88. So I started college in January of '89 at the University of Akron in their fire protection program, which was a 2-year program. The same time I got hired by the city of Fairlawn as a part-time firefighter EMT. So I lived with 3 other firemen. So you had 4 bachelor firemen living in a 2-bedroom apartment. And I'm sure this is not an R-rated story, but there were a lot of R-rated stories that came out of that place.
I just imagine how dirty it was too.
Oh no, it was clean.
Did you guys take turn cooking like in the firehouse, or how'd that go?
Well,
firemen are big on the eating and cooking.
I used to be the cook all the time at the fire station. At the apartment, we had my one roommate that I started in the fire service with, a lifelong best friend. He and I were kind of like the civil ones. The 2 other roommates who I loved to death, but they would come home drunk and eat all our food, and mess the place up. But we'd also have some pretty rip-roaring parties. We had a bar in Fairlawn called Huckleberries. And Wednesday night was the training night for the fire department. And after Huckleberries would close down, it would come back to our apartment. And several times the cops had to show up and not break the party down, but they'd mediate and tell us to cool it off. And again, we could get away with a lot more stuff then than you can now.
Yeah, I think the whole thing about that'd be funny nowadays if that happened. You probably would have been kicked out of the program. God only knows, it would have changed the whole course of your career. Not that it was right all the time, although back then, but
yeah, I mean, we had a 4x4 pull off one Christmas in the front lawn after the bar closed, and the cops had to show up and kick everybody out of the front lawn of the apartment building.
I feel like you and your brother, just hearing these stories just in the few hours, I feel kind of bad for your parents a bit. You guys must have been like just.
He wasn't. I was. Every gray hair that my father had, or hair that he didn't have, and every one that my mom has. That mostly because of me.
Imagine you both were like terrors like you. It would have been. I mean,
they wouldn't have had a 4th kid.
Good point. I think that's why my dad and mom waited 8 years to have a kid, is because of me. That's what I always.
Yeah, our youngest sister's 8 years difference between, and our older sister's 2 years.
Nice. So you graduate 1992. You actually graduate.
I did
from college, which you said you were never going to do. You didn't want to do that.
I did. I graduated with actually 2 degrees. Spent most of the time on the dean's list, actually, which shocked everybody.
Take that out of. Sorry.
It surprised almost everybody because I fell in love with college, and they had what they call a 2+2 degree, where I could go to the College of Education and get basically a technical education, a bachelor's in technical education, so I could teach adults. And it was either that or go to nursing school and get another associate's degree. So I graduated with a bachelor's in science and adult education or technical education, and an associate's in fire protection. My last semester was when the Gulf War had kicked off, and our unit had transitioned to an 88 Mike company, a transportation company, and that was the time that Otto had gone in, but we're sitting back at the armory, and we're like, we're never going to go. And we have World War II deuce and a halves, and we show up the next month, and we all have desert camo, brand spanking new 5-ton vehicles, and we're like, oh shit!
Like, oh shit, this is happening.
So we were in our 1-year train up window to transition to 88 Mike, and I'm up at college, and I'm listening to all these. Woke, well, it wasn't even a term then. A bunch of pansies is what I called them, complaining about they didn't sign up to go to war. They just wanted free college, and it really pissed me off. And I got
Yeah,
involved.
but that was common. I'm sorry, that was common though. I mean, there were a lot of guys like I got commissioned in '94, so there's a lot of people that were. That was normal to see though. A lot of people didn't think anything was going to happen. So
Yeah,
it definitely was. Even after 91 though. I mean, it's a little bit early. Even 94, they were the same way. People were like, that's never going to happen again.
Yeah, I had one of my good friends that I worked with was in the Marine Reserves, and we're sitting in chemistry class one day, and the next day he's gone. So I got involved in some protests. I was the agitator because I was telling them how full of crap they were about not, they signed a contract and they should go. And I volunteered to go with another unit, but because we're at that, they were trying to maintain unit integrity, they wouldn't let us jump ship. And had the ground war lasted one more, just a couple more weeks, we would have been gone.
It was a quick one.
It was. I remember sitting at the fire station when the shock and awe happened, and being able to watch that on TV and know that your happy ass might be there in another couple of weeks. It was a sobering thought, but I would have gone in a heartbeat and proudly served. Matter of fact, I feel a little robbed that I didn't get a chance to deploy.
Yeah, that's a common thing with like the people that didn't. I think it's I can understand that, but also it is what it is. I mean, you served your country. I would say that's the thing. It's just you did what a lot of other people didn't do, and really honestly, there's the bad part of deploying outweighs the good part. If you really think about it, I mean,
well,
if you're really honest, but if anybody tells you like I love being deployed, 3 years, or I love being deployed, that was my favorite thing. A lot of them probably aren't married anymore. And they've got some other issues. Like we all have issues, but I think it's interesting, talking to, like your brother and then other veterans at that same time. I think a lot of them still feel that same way for a long time. We went a long way, before that it was a long time, Vietnam to Desert Storm, and then, Desert Storm, another 10 years before, anything happened. And a lot of people came and went before that happened. But I mean, that's,
not to jump ahead, but that 10 years following Desert Storm up until 9/11, the how the Guard and the reserves changed their training standards and changed their ability to react is just astounding.
Yeah, 100%.
But I equate it to people as like, well, why would you want to do that? And it's like, I served at that time. I'd been in for 3-4 years, and I wouldn't say the Guard did a lot of training then, but it was equivalent to me being a firefighter or an EMT, never being able to go to a fire, or never being able to. I never got to use that skill, so that's why I feel robbed. And while I served, there's a part of me there's a void because I didn't get to experience what my grandfather felt when he went to Europe, or what my son experienced on his deployment to Kuwait and Afghanistan, or not, excuse me, Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. His unit just is deploying to Iraq, but he's going to stay stateside for this one.
You happy about that?
I am as a parent, but I know there will be a portion of him that is, even though he's had the one deployment and part of it was considered a combat zone, I know he's going to look back and because he's a newly promoted sergeant, so he had a chance to build part of his team, and then he's sending them off with somebody else. And I know there's a part of him that's like, I hope they're taking care of my troops, because I know I would.
But the important thing, Ian, is I have to tell you, is you surpassed your dad and your uncle Otto, or Wayne, or whatever you call him. You got out of the E4 Mafia. That's all. You could talk about that for the rest of your life. You could brag on them about that, right? And again, not going to deployment after you've done it once, twice. I don't know what the magic number is, but I mean, I had one deployment. Honestly, that was enough. I can't imagine sometimes, people have done 3, 4, 5. It's gotten crazy. So
it's too bad you couldn't pop that meme up that I sent you, because
I'll put it up later. I do have
I went on to, and I'm sure we'll get into it, I went on to lead in a different capacity, not in the military, and I'm very proud of that. But I think I would have been an effective NCO or an officer. It just wasn't in the cards for me. But I'm proud of, even though people joke about the E4 Mafia, and when we get into my Illinois service, I was able to use my my experience and my time in grade to help senior leaders kind of tone down some of the asshattery that goes on in the enlisted ranks that they can't control, but a senior E4 person can.
I thought you were going to go the complete opposite. Like I use my skill to be able to just, set back the Illinois National Guard a good 5 years. No, I get it. But no, it is. I mean, we always make a joke. I mean, I was too focused on the Marine Corps memes this week to put that one up, but It is a good one. We'll have to use that later on, definitely. So we're 25 minutes in. David's not going to do a lot of drinking. He's had surgery, and he's on painkillers intermittently. So we don't want to get him a lot of alcohol and have him fall asleep in 15 minutes because nobody wants to hear me talk by myself here for the next hour. So we're going to have our first pour. We're going to go to our first pour, which is what you brought, the first featured bottle for tonight, E.H. Taylor, small batch bottle and bond. And, this comes from, we talked about this distillery in the past, Buffalo Trace. This brand is one of probably the most iconic brands they have. They released E.H. Taylor small batch, I think, in 2013. It's the entry level expression to the E.H. Taylor line. We have a couple of them here. There's single barrel, straight rye, barrel proof. There's a lot of other ones. Warehouse C, Tornado Survivor, a bunch of other ones. But this is the entry level one. A really, really good solid bottle. I'm glad you brought it. We haven't featured it before. I didn't know we had to open it up. He's bringing up actually a brand new bottle. I could have just saved it and we could have used one of mine. It would have probably been easier. But what's cool about this, if you've never seen this before, it's actually really cool. It comes in this tube. It's a great gift if you can get them. Before they were $90, $100. That's just crazy to get these. But this is like a super gift. It's great for like a stocking or something like that. But it does come with a cool tube. We'll give a pour of that. And I'll make sure I pour you a nice, small, only about 3 or 4 ounces. But a little bit more about this. This actually is named after Colonel E.H. Taylor, who, if you have never heard of him, he's kind of considered one of the founding fathers of bourbon after Prohibition and everything. And so, they named this after him. He was the master distiller at what used to be, what Buffalo Trace used to be, which is the OFC distillery. And a lot of the stuff that they use there at Buffalo Trace is still, if you've been to the E.H. Taylor tour, you can go on. But a lot of the actual distilling techniques they use, they're kind of go back to Colonel H. Taylor. The bottle and bond, these are all non-age stated. They're kind of rumored to be anywhere from 6 to 10 years old. The mash bill is Buffalo Trace's mash bill number 1, which is their low rye mash bill. And again, they don't really tell you what exactly that means. There's a lot of speculation what goes for that. And then we won't bore you, but it is bottle and bonded. So there's some rules that come into what bottle and bond, and we won't talk about that tonight. We'll focus more on Dave here. So thank you for bringing that. This is actually one of my favorites. I don't drink it anymore because I never know when I'm going to be able to get a bottle, and I'm sure as hell not paying $90 to $100 for it, which is what people are selling for. So cheers. Always good. Always good. So we'll go back to you now. We're back to you. You ready now? You're good though now.
I'm good.
All right, good. I was kind of worried about that. Would be the worst thing to have you drink too much while you're on the painkillers, but not that none of us have ever done that before. So you mentioned again that you went to Illinois. So you like a lot of National Guard or like National Guardsmen and reservists. You changed your MOS 3 times, right? Total.
I did. Yes.
So your last stint was actually as 11 Charlie, 11 Bravo. So you went to Illinois, moved out to Illinois for work, I'm assuming.
I did. We in 1993, I got hired at the Illinois Fire Academy at the University of Illinois as a faculty member. And so my girlfriend, now my wife, and I at the time packed everything up and moved to Champaign-Urbana. And I got out for a year. I originally went and I met with the recruiter immediately because I just enjoyed my time with the Army National Guard. And I told him, I said, listen, I have a pretty important position and I need a little time to get acclimated. And so pretty much 1 year to the date, I rolled in and said, all right, where do I sign up at? And he said, well, we got 2 spots. He said, you can be an infantryman or you can be a mortarman. And I'm like, well, I don't have any desire, even though explosives are cool. I don't want to be a mortarman. So he goes, well, we have an opening with our scout platoon. They were 11 Bravo scouts. but you got to pass the test. And I'm like, well, what's the test? And they're like, well,
hey, Marines, it's not being able to eat like a 6-pack of crayons.
Or pee on your hand, not pee on your hand. So they said, well, you got to go out with a unit for a drill weekend, and you got to meet with a platoon sergeant. So I said, okay, well, where are they at? And he's like, well, they're out in the field. So I said, well, let me know where they're at. So I drove my POV out in the field and linked up with the E7 who was a Ranger tab and had spent time in a Ranger battalion and really squared away guy. But I hang out with him for the day, and he's like, all right, we'll be back here at 0700 because they were in the field. The scout platoon was in the field.
Before you go, that's a good Marine joke. That's when the big hand's on the 12 and the little hand's on the 7. It's Marine, pick on the Marines Day.
So he says, be back here at 0700. I'm like, well, what do you mean? He said, well, we're staying out here. And I'm like, well, I'll stay. He's like, well, you didn't bring anything. I don't care. I'll sleep in my truck. So he gave me a pair of his BDUs, and I threw them on, and I hung out, did what they did, even though I didn't have to. And the next day he's like, all right, you're in. So I spent from 94 to 98 with that platoon and reclassed at Camp Robinson, Arkansas, which was okay. Wasn't bad.
What was worse, that or Fort McCoy? Because I spent time at Fort McCoy.
Fort McCoy, I didn't think wasn't too bad.
Were you there in the winter?
No.
Yeah, I was there in the winter. It's awful.
I was there. I was there
Cool.
for. I was there for some ATs. Real quick funny story is, they had a rule we couldn't sleep. I was always the platoon sergeant's radio operator, and we got along really good. And the other thing that he knew is I was there because I wanted to be there. I wasn't drawing any more college benefits. I could quit whenever I wanted. I was just there because I enjoyed it. So that pulled weight with him. Well, we were not, when we were back in our base camp, we were not allowed to sleep in the vehicles. Well, I'm a Fulmer. I'm going to skirt the rules. I didn't say we couldn't sleep on the vehicles. So it'd get chilly at night, and I started sleeping on the hood of the Hummer. And he comes over and he goes, Fulmer, what are you doing? I'm like, hey, Sergeant Walters, you said I couldn't sleep in it. I'm not in it. I'm on it. I could be under it, but I'm on it. I'm on the hood. He goes, well, why? I'm like, well, because it's warm up here. He's like, well, son of a bitch. He said, get off there. And then he took my spot. So I'm no dummy. I looked at them evaluating the situation. I looked at the Humvee and had a nice brush guard that laid down right in front of the radiator. So I plopped that brush guard down, rolled out my bed mat. I had a better sleeping arrangements than before he kicked me off the hood. And I was happy for 2 weeks.
No sleeping in the Humvee. I did a lot of that.
Yeah.
The hood, I've slept on the hood for not the brush guard. I've done the brush guard though.
We spent.
It doesn't seem very comfortable. But.
Well, with a sleeping mat, it was fine.
That's
We spent a lot of time. We were 10 months out of the year. We were in the field, and a lot of times it was, in the winter months we'd have a GP medium set up, but most of the time it was with a whoopee and a poncho.
Yeah, because Fort McCoy, when I read that, when you sent that to me, it just brings back nightmares. So I mobilized a unit when I was stationed at Fort Knox. We had to go up there and mobilize a unit, and I left Fort Bragg and then went to Kentucky, which is warm, and then we went up to Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, and I didn't bring any like cold weather gear or anything. And I still remember like the first snowfall. We were staying in a hotel, and I come out, and the clerk is like, "Is that all you're wearing?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's fine. I got some gloves. It's fine." She's like, "It's like 4 below zero out there and snowing." I'm like, "I'll be fine." I go out there to scrape off the car, and I come in. I felt like I was going to die. All I had was like, snivel gear hidden where you couldn't see it. And I immediately called my wife and was like, "You have to go to go to my room, find this big bag, put it in the mail." Because Fort McCoy was cold. I mean, I'd never been to Wisconsin before. You've never been there. It got.
Were you ever there in the warm summer months? They had
we were there till the end of the. We were in. I can't remember what we did there. We hit the fall, maybe into the summer, maybe the fall.
The mosquitoes were as big as pterodactyls there.
Yeah. I wasn't there for the mosquitoes. The cold was worse. Was bad enough. I couldn't have handled that. But that was a interesting assignment, mobilizing a unit that was heading on its way to Iraq. It's kind of like you were talking about your son, where it was the first time I ever trained someone, and then you just say goodbye to them and hope that everything goes well. And unfortunately for them, it didn't go well. But that's a whole different story. So you're up in Illinois now. You're a fireman. You're working at, or you're still working at the time at the Illinois Fire Academy. You did that till about 1990, all the way to about 1998 or so.
up until 1998, I also volunteered with the Village of Savoy Fire Department, and wound up leaving. When I left in '98, I was an assistant chief, a volunteer assistant chief there. And that's really what segued me into my first career fire chief's job, which is when I moved to Fitchburg, Wisconsin, a suburb of Madison, and I had to get out just because at that time I had a small infant, and shortly after we moved to Wisconsin, we'd have another one in the oven, and so I got out for a couple years until 9/11 happened, and I was home. I lived about a quarter mile from the fire station. I was home because my wife was at the dentist that morning, and I think Otto called me and said, "Hey, flip on the news." And I flipped on the news after the first plane hit the tower, and I'm watching it. My son could barely speak. He was a couple years old at that time, and enough broken that I could understand what he was saying. And when that first tower fell, I remember crying. And he's like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "We just killed a bunch of people." And my wife came home and I said, "I'm going back. I'm going back in." And she's like,
No, you're not.
She's like, "No, you're not." She said, you have two small kids, and you drugged me across 3 states," which I did. And she goes, "You can go, but we won't be here when you get back."
Yeah.
And it was a wake up call because I was torn. It was like, the balloon went up. It's time to go. I mean, all things be damned. It's time to go for the red, white, and blue. And then I really had to weigh what my obligation was as a husband and a father, and more importantly, with an attack on America, I had to look at my position in a different way. It wasn't just putting out fires and going to people that were having a medical emergency. Now it was like you got to train, you got to prepare your folks if they bring that shit here.
Right. But I'm not great at math either, but I think it's interesting that, you guys see you got a little choked up and it was funny, but at that point in 2001, how many years have you been serving as a fireman or EMT? You said 1984. So somebody help with the math here. Nate, come on. Give me a number.
15.
Oh, yeah. A good. I mean, that's interesting that at that time you'd served almost 20 years doing as a fireman, and you still felt compelled to serve. And I would challenge and say that at that point you already served and given enough. Maybe it's in a different place, but it's back to your community. I think it's always interesting when we talk to a lot of firemen or policemen when they start talking about the military, especially like tomorrow or like Memorial Day. There's a lot of they're like guilty that they didn't join the military, but meanwhile they spent 20. What's your total number of years as a fireman?
Over 30.
Right. So there's nothing to, that's pretty admirable. I'd say
it was for me that, I had to make peace with it. And again, my piece was, you have to prepare your folks to, if they bring it to any small town community. I mean, we had the state capitol that we were, going to be going in on if something happened. We had, other critical pieces of infrastructure, and we just looked at it a little different. We had to retrain our folks to deal with homegrown terrorism, and that was my way to put that to bed. That your military time's over, but you still have an important role to play in national defense.
How old were you in 2001?
I was 31.
You'd have been that 31-year-old E4. That would have been great. They'd have been like. Which was common when you'd see a lot in the National Guard and Reserves. That was so funny. You'd see like some guys that were like super old and they were like at E5, but then you talk to them and they'd been in and then gotten out and got back in, and it's crazy. But thank you for answering the call. I think or trying to answer the call, and you gotta I hope your wife is listening or will listen. And Amber, there's nothing wrong with being selfish and telling them no. Sometimes, as I was just told earlier. Sometimes we need people to keep us in check. That's definitely, there's nothing wrong with
I wanted to share another quick story talking about the E4 component because I'll forget. But, I think with the episode with what Otto, we talked about the worst place you could ever go, and mine was Fort Polk. So our platoon sergeant got promoted to first sergeant, so we were going to Fort Polk with another unit with an acting platoon sergeant with another company, and we were supposed to be going down there and go up against the Op 4. And we were so far in the rear, it wasn't funny. And we, we're a scout platoon. We're supposed to be out snooping and pooping, and we weren't. And so we were just getting crapped on by this captain of this unit because he didn't know us. And I went in to the acting platoon sergeant. As a matter of fact, the squad leaders and the platoon sergeant, and I said, "You guys better do your job." And they're like, "What do you mean?" I said, "You better run interference for us and make sure we get tasked with the shit that we're supposed to get tasked with, or I'm going to go jump up and down and piss all over that captain's desk." And they're like, "No, you won't." I'm like, I said, I'm 20. I'm 28 years old. I don't have to be here. I can walk out right now. You don't think I'll do it? Just test me. And they took me out and they smoked me, and then they half-assed did what they were supposed to do, but I didn't care. It's like, you're gonna screw with the people and nobody's gonna say anything. I'll say something. So the other real quick story was one time the first sergeant, he's having a annual meeting with the enlisted. And all these guys that have never ever been in another unit. All these E1s, E2s, E3s, E4s, they're bitching and moaning about stuff that doesn't have shit to do with Shinola. And I got tired of hearing it because I had a good thing going. I'd come in 10 months out of the year. I'd come in on a Friday. I'd go out in the field. I'd be home by 1 o'clock on Sunday because we busted our ass. And so I told the first sergeant, I said, "Hey, first sergeant," I said, "Do you mind if I speak freely as the senior E4?
As the 47-year-old
as the head of the mafia here,
as the head of the
maid guy,
as a don of the mafia."
I said, and I looked at him. I said, "You all need to shut the hell up."
That's what you didn't say. Shut the fuck up. I would have been.
I don't think I dropped the F-bomb. I mean, I would have been one or two times that I had a filter.
Missed opportunity.
Yeah. So I looked at these guys. I said, "Listen," I said, "I got a great thing going. I come in, I draw my gear, I go out in the field, I do something I love, I come home. I'm at home by 1 or 2 o'clock on Sundays, and you all are about to screw it up." And I said, "If you screw it up, I'll kill you." I said, "So knock this shit off, listen to the first sergeant, and don't screw my deal up." And later on, he came up to me. He goes, "I really appreciate that because I can't say that shit and you can."
Yeah. And everyone's like, "Shut up, Grandpa."
Yeah. Well, I just get even with them.
I'm kidding. I just think it's funny. I love it. That I was actually, I forgot. Otto told me that you got out as an E4 also. So It's kind of funny that I'm glad you guys stayed at that same level though, because I can imagine if one of you had been like one rank higher.
Oh, we would have been a fist fight.
Oh God, it'd still be going on all these years now. It was so funny.
Yeah, every time I was due to get promoted, I transferred units. So when I got to the infantry unit, which was the most fun I ever had, by the time I was up to get in an E5 slot, I got out, which I didn't care. I was there because I loved it. It really didn't matter what my rank was. I guess I was high enough to stir the shit, but low enough when it hit the fan, it didn't hit me. So it was fun.
the primo spot, right in the perfect spot. So you get out. So your span of service 87 to 98, right? 11 years. About the same amount of time I served. And then this is when you transitioned to become a professional fireman, I'd say, or fire chief. How are we saying?
It was. I took my first career fire chief's job. I was 28. Fitchburg would be equivalent to a Dublin. I mean, it was the high rent district of the Madison metro area. One of them. It was on the south side, and they had two other career fire chiefs, and I was the third. And that was unique because there weren't a whole lot of 28-year-old career fire chiefs in the country. And at that point in time, I had my master's degree. I had completed an executive 4-year executive program at the National Fire Academy. I had all the right pedigree to be a chief. I just didn't have the age. And I remember I moved up there. I shipped my wife and my son back to Ohio to go on vacation to Myrtle Beach, and I moved to Wisconsin, picked out an apartment on my own without the wife's approval.
Good choice, probably.
It was a beautiful place. She got pissed because of the amount of how much the rent was. But it was
a
beautiful
but anytime
place.
you do with anything without them, that's a bad choice. I mean, it's probably a sweet apartment, but you don't do anything.
But I recall, and I can imagine it's much like a new platoon leader. What the hell did I get myself into? And I was staying at the fire station until I got an apartment. And every morning I'd get up and I'd go take a shower, and I'd throw up in the shower because my nerves were, every morning I would just dry heave in the shower. And I was so afraid that I was going to fail.
That sounds like more like a first sergeant thing, like not a lieutenant, platoon leader type thing. That's a shout at our resident first sergeant over there, but he's always giving me a hard time. But no, I think you're right. I mean, anytime you any leadership position, it doesn't matter. I think the same thing would be said if you were a first sergeant or somebody else. When you take charge of that many people, or you're responsible for that many people, if you're not nervous about it, there's something wrong with you, because you're taking on a ton of responsibility, and that's not easy, you know. But 28 years old. How many people in the fire department?
We had I had about 7 full-timers and about 50 part-time and paid on call folks. We protected 36 square miles. I mean, it was really a high-end community. Barry Alvarez from UW lived in our community, as well as some other real notable folks. And it was great in the aspect that it was my first career fire chief's job. Family-wise, we had been there about, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, found out we were pregnant with my daughter. Kendall.
All right.
But it gave my wife and I a chance to bond with our family with nobody else around. So nobody else watched our kids. There were only once or twice the whole 4 years we were there that somebody else watched our kids, and we were able to bond as a family unit.
Yeah, we were talking about that. My wife and I, all of our, we lived away from our family for all of our military, in my military career, and then also when I first got out. So it's always interesting. Like when I have other, when I talk to people now and they're like, oh, it's so stressful. Like a good friend of mine, his son is actually dropping off, like regularly drops off the grandkids to him. And like, it's interesting. Like a lot of people don't realize that in the military, and it's funny to hear that from the fire service as well, that, a lot of times these people have left the nest, they left their support structure. It's just you and your family and the soldiers or fellow firemen to bridge that gap. And it does build a strong, I think it does build a strong bond. That's one of the things I think is interesting about my family is my 3 boys, and we're really close because we've always really had just us sometimes, like when I moved up here in 2014, that was like crazy to move up here. We didn't know anyone here. And I don't think we'd have been able to do that if it wasn't for them moving younger in the military and then just spending that tight, so like we can do this together and as a group. So understand that it is funny, like talking to the parallels between like the military and the fire service. And in a couple of weeks, we're going to have on a former Air Force guy who's actually a policeman. So we're starting to transition now into people on boards of Patriot that, serve the military and also still continue to serve as in the public service, which is pretty amazing. So Otto didn't come out and watch the kids for you?
No,
he was too busy getting the law degree that he never used.
No, he came out a couple times, but not to watch the kids. We came out and golfed and went to some parties. And
so some personal stuff. You said you guys fought a lot.
Yeah, we did.
So when did you like not want to like choke out Otto or punch him in the face? What year did that start?
It wasn't until probably
we got an answer.
Probably really wasn't. In college, we had a couple scuffles. My best friend who wound up being my operations chief was on. He had one time Otto came out to Illinois and we went out and got tanked up and got in a fight at the fire station. And the assistant chief, who's my buddy, had to break us up. But really,
what year is this?
This would have been 93, 94. Really, probably when I moved back, the bond that we have now really began to strengthen. It was one of the benefits in 2002 when I moved back is I remember telling him I got the job offer we were out at the old engine company number, what was it? The old fire station restaurant in Columbus, engine company number 12 or whatever, down in German Village. We were there celebrating our birthday when I told him that I got the job offer. And that was like one of the biggest benefits for me, not only to bring my wife back home, but and my family, but to be closer, even though it was Dayton, to be that much closer to him.
That's the Miami Township division,
right,
where you went in?
Yeah.
So that's when you could tolerate him when you moved back in 2002 is when your bond formed? Because I feel like you guys have a strong bond now.
Yeah,
right?
We're inseparable now. I don't know so much that the wife's like it. But yeah, we've always had a twin connection. I mean, we could tell you what each other's thinking. He'll call my mom, I'll call my mom right after one another. When my dad was still alive, we'd call at the same time. he'll call me and what am I thinking? I can tell you what he's thinking.
That's kind of scary that you guys are thinking the same thing though. Now
Yeah.
that I've had you guys on,
Yeah, I probably have more deviant thoughts than he does, but
I don't know though. He's probably blaming them on you though. I think he has them though. But that is great. I mean, that's a great story for me to hear. Like because it was funny to hear him. He talked a lot about you guys fighting a lot and being polar opposites. And it's funny. Like I just know from talking to you guys here in the past month or so, and then knowing your brother for a while, like your guys' bond is like, it's tight now. Like it's like you guys are fighting other people now instead of each other, which is kind of the way.
yeah, even when we fought, if somebody did something to the other one, whether it was me or him, we had the other one's back. I came down to Capitol from Akron to see him one time, and I can't remember how much alcohol was involved, but it was quite a lot, and we almost got in a fisticuff. He almost got in a fisticuffs, and I've never been known to have a filter. As a matter of fact, I always let my
you didn't say fuck when you should have though. So I feel
right,
like you have a filter.
But I always let my alligator mouth overload my hummingbird ass, and so this individual that he didn't get along with, pretty big strapping kid. It was like it might have been our 21st birthday, and we're walking up the dorm, and this kid walks by and he goes, "Oh, you're twins." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm glad you can fucking see." And the fight was on, and Wayne Otto stood up to him, and we almost got in a fisticuffs.
So do you call him Wayne? That's just like the
nah.
What's the?
It all depends. A lot of times I just call him asshole. But like he said, he hated Otto when he was in high school.
Right.
It wasn't until he got to college he figured that was a good way to pick up chicks that he changed it into Otto. So I'll call him either or.
So are any of your parents alive now?
Our mother's still alive.
So what does your mom think? Like knowing that you guys didn't get along, is she happy that you guys have bonded?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm sure she's probably that was like I had talked about this before. That's my biggest fear. If my boys like hate each other and fighting, I wouldn't know how to handle that honestly.
Oh, they handle
I'd be fighting them, but I that's one of my things as a parent that like I love to see is I love to see my boys like bonding and doing stuff together. I don't like when they get together and do anything against me, but that's different. But it is nice to see them, have each other's back. Not in the fighting, the awful things, but just to be like supportive and things like that. So I can imagine like you guys are both been pretty honest that like growing up you didn't really get along with each other.
Yeah, I mean we didn't fight constantly, and we had to be strategic about it because my parents were very, very strict. So I could probably still go in the closet and find the white leather belt that we used to get disciplined with. But to give you an example, one time we were fighting on the bus, and I found my mom sent me a copy of the letter where the bus driver wanted to get us kicked off the bus, and it was probably almost all my fault. But we got into a fisticuffs, and she let us off the bus, and we're just wailing on each other, and the bus has stopped. Kids are hanging out looking. Well, we weren't smart enough to look in the driveway and see that our father was home early. And he came out and whipped that belt off and beat the hell out of both of us while everybody on the bus sat there and laughed. So we didn't get we had to be really creative of how and when we went fisticuffs.
You guys sound like you figured that out. You guys are masters at arguing and fighting a little bit. But I'm glad to see you guys at that type bond. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I love the razzing that's going on. I think he might have fallen asleep though. He hasn't said anything in about. I'm trying to look at the time. A good 30 minutes or so. He did tell. I think that's him pretty much saying that
he has a short attention span.
Yeah, he probably fell asleep by now. But no, it's cool. So now you started. Now you moved back to Ohio, 2002. You're at the Miami Township Division as a fire chief. Like is that your first? You feel like that's your second real gig as a professional fireman or fire chief?
It is.
How many people there now?
I had about 100 plus. I had about 30, 40 full-timers and that many, a little bit higher in part-time folks. That one was really unique because I had a young boss that hired me, and unfortunately he and I meshed really well, but a month into my tenure, he had taken another job and moved. But that was when I knew that I was on the right career path because I beat out two chief officers from Metro fire departments, one from Dayton, one from Akron. So I had confidence that I could do it. I wasn't throwing up in the shower anymore.
So sorry to be ignorant about this, but what's the size of like the Akron, like roughly? Do you know like the size of Akron? Because it's thousands, right? For the Akron Fire Department.
Yeah, they have probably 400 or 500 firefighters, 14, 15 fire stations.
Okay.
Dayton had 13 or 14, probably the same size. But I was going up against guys that I was 32, and I was competing with guys that were 50.
Right, because I grew up upstate New York, so like about an hour and 15 minutes from New York City. So it's funny. There was a ton of people that were. A lot of the dads were either policemen or firemen. So it's actually one of the members of the group is Doug Mitchell. I hope he's listening, or he'll listen on. But I think he's still a fire chief now at 50. I think I'm gonna say he's older than me because I think he was. If not, he's 49. But hopefully he's 50. But I think he's a fire chief now in the FDNY, and I think he's been doing that. If I'm wrong, you can correct me, Doug. But I think less than 4 years. So it's kind of crazy to hear about being a fire chief at 28 years old. And I think it took him a long time. And I think he's one of those guys that waited a little bit because he enjoyed being a lieutenant. I think from what I've been told, some stories about him that he didn't tell me other people did. But yeah, so that's crazy. So it's funny. It's 100 people. You're now a professional fireman. The military is behind you, right? You stay there until 2009, right?
Yeah, 2009. So in 2008, I had an opportunity to go to Harvard for an executive fellowship. So there were 8 fire chiefs across the country that were selected that year to go to attend the JFK School of Government. If you had ever told me I was going to go to Harvard, I would have been as a visiting janitor.
Yeah, you keep telling me like you did. It's funny. He said he didn't want to go to college, but he blew over one. So he went to the University of Akron. He also went to Governor State University for public administration, and then he actually started to try to get his doctorate, right?
Right.
At the Walden University. Yeah. And then now he's going to Harvard. He's trying to play like he didn't want to go to school. For someone that didn't want to go to college, you did a lot of college.
I did. Well, this was a 3-week stint at the JFK School of Government, and they had senior executives in state and local government. And there, they do some counseling, one-on-one counseling, and they told me, and it was weird how they could read you, but they're like, listen, within a year or two of you going back, you're going to be in a totally different organization. I'm like, you're full of shit. I had no desire to move. I'd built a department. Was
there like a ball? There like a
they must have been
like a fortune teller.
Yeah, must have been. But we had put a team together and taken the fire department from zero to one of the best departments in the Miami Valley. I had no desire to leave, but I had an asshole boss. I had a boss that taught me more about what not to do than what to do, and it got to the point where I was ineffective as a leader. And I'd always, every organization I've always been in, I'm like, especially as a young leader, they're like, how long are you going to stay? You're just here to jump, it's a stepping stone. I'm like, I'll stay until I'm not effective, then I'll leave. So a position came open up in east of Reynoldsburg, and I applied and got hired, and came up here in 2009 and lived by the sword, die by the sword. I was the fire chief there officially until July of 2014, but I got politically assassinated right after Memorial Day on 2012, and was run through an administrative process, fired, fought it, got rehired for 30 seconds, and then run through an administrative process again that I wasn't successful the second time. I took it all the way to the Ohio Supreme Court. They failed to want to hear the case, and that ended my fire service career and took me down a road that I never thought I'd be in, and it was some pretty dark days.
Right, and you shared this today, and I guess it's like should we go to the next? Should we get a pour before we start this? I feel like we should, right?
Sure.
I feel like we got it. This is gonna get dark, so I'll finish my water. We'll go to the second featured bottle. We're staying with the Jim Beam family here. Another great bottle. Like we talked about Jim Beam a lot in the past, and we'll continue to do their big support and reports with Patriots. It's a great company, and I appreciate all the support they give us. So today we're actually going to go with one of the ones we haven't talked about is one of their ryes. If you want to open it for you, you want to this one? Yeah, go ahead. Throw it open. David will pour that open, but like we talked about, Jim Beam is located in Claremont, Kentucky. And why we're talking about that and why I picked this also is starting tomorrow, pay attention to the page. We're doing a barrel pick the Tuesday and Wednesday, actually Tuesday, but it involves a Tuesday, Wednesday participation. So we're going to actually raffle off a spot to join us, the admin team from Towards the Patriots next week down in Claremont to do a pick of our next barrel pick for Towards the Patriots, another Knob Creek bourbon. So pay attention. It'll probably start early in the morning. But yeah, you have an opportunity to go with us. But like we talked about before, this is a little different before. This was a little bit later than the bourbon. This came out in 2018 is when they started doing these single barrel offerings. The Knob Creek that we're having tonight is from Opa Grill and Tavern. The Rye Not Drink More. It's 100, like all Knob Creek ryes, it's 115 proof. This one is actually 5 years and 6 months old. And the mash bill, like we talked about with E.H. Taylor, but unlike their bourbon, is actually undisclosed. But if you do a lot of research and look at it, it's said to be about 55% rye, 35% corn, and 10% malt. So don't know if that's right. They won't talk about that much history. But again, a good segue. Pay attention here in the next couple of days to figure out if you start checking your calendars now. We're gonna take some donations to the group and then run a randomizer to see who's going to join us. You want to come? It's going to be a really good pick. We're going to get to taste some really good alcohol, but it's just an overall great experience. So we'll talk about that. So here, cheers. And now we're going to get into what I consider. First of all, I want to, before we talk about this, I want to say thank you for willing to talk about what we're about to talk about. I think we're about to talk about the same thing, right?
Yep.
And it's one of the reasons that I started the group was to combat the veteran suicide, the suicide rate that's totally astronomical. It needs to stop. And one of the reasons why now we're on the verge of becoming a 501c3 charitable organization to hopefully stop that. But you were today. It was interesting. We talked real quick. Probably maybe like 15 minutes or so. We've been DMing and texting back and forth for about a week or so. That's kind of works. And then usually I like to talk to people a little bit before, even if I know them. And what's interesting about you and I is we've never met until tonight.
Right.
And one of the things that we shared today that you wanted to talk about, I usually tell everybody, just think if you haven't been a guest, I usually do the spiel of what we're not going to talk about, right? It's kind of like, we don't talk about politics and COVID and things like that. But you were really quick to say, hey, there's something I want to share. And you talked about, you didn't give specifics of what happened at your job, but you did share that you, like many other veterans and other, firemen and policemen, you actually contemplated suicide.
Yep.
And took it, not only contemplated, but, I can turn it over to you.
Yeah. Having been in the emergency services for a lot of years, and I did some national stuff where I went around and I trained fire departments nationwide and served on a committee on the board for one of the largest sections of the International Chiefs. So I got the privilege to travel across the country and go to a lot of seminars. And one of the things that the emergency services was slow to pick up on was the rise in suicides amongst cops, firemen, and EMS people. There was a little bit of publicity, like after baby Jessica was rescued several years later, that main rescuer committed suicide, but it's happening. Maybe not 22 a day, but it's entirely, one's too many, but it's way more than one a day. You never think that you're going to be one. And throughout my career, I would share some of my stories with Otto and some of my friends. And I guess I was fortunate enough in my career to always be able to disassociate some of the horrors that I saw. Never had a nightmare, never stayed up at night. I remember the calls. I remember the worst call I was ever on. It was before I had kids, which was probably a good thing. But nothing in my career ever made me think, this isn't worth being here.
A tipping point or anything, yeah.
Yeah, it was just I would disassociate the human body from a person and drive on. but I saw the rise. Had an individual that I served on this board with. First time I met him, we were at a board meeting. Within a week, he came home and hung himself underneath a bridge. And he was a father, a husband, a young fire chief, and never understood why. Ran new thousands, hundreds of suicides as an emergency provider. But the correlation between why a veteran does it and I only say this based on my experience and why somebody in emergency services may do it is very paralleled in reasons. And for me, also there was a quote up there from Leo Croker. The only ambition I ever had was to be a fireman.
I hate that he shows that early. He's stealing my thunder, but
I have that framed. And that's
steal my thunder. Sheesh. No, I'm joking.
That's
I feel good though, because I searched long and hard for these quotes. I'm glad that resonated, and they can see it before we do that. But yeah, it's you want me to do the quote now?
Sure,
we'll do it now. What's that then? So he has this frame. Hopefully I can do it some honor. But yeah, like you said, it's from Chief Edward Croker. I have no ambition in this world but one, and that is to be a fireman. The position may in the eyes of some appear to be a lowly one, but we who know the work which the fireman has to do believe that his is a noble calling. Our proudest moment is to save lives. Under the impulse of such thoughts, the nobility of the occupation thrills us and stimulates us to deeds of daring, even of supreme sacrifice. And again, that's from a quote from Chief Edward Croker. Sorry about that. I'm glad that was up there. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That wasn't planned, by the way, everybody.
But that's all I ever wanted to do. That was my passion. It was my identity. It became who I was. To the point where this will sound silly, but my wife used to get pissed off when tornado warnings would go out. I'd make sure that they were safe, and then I'd hit the road. She's like, "Where are you going?" It's like, it's time for me to go to work. I was never off duty. I mean, the only week I got off duty was sitting in the tree stand. And then to have that taken away from you in a very public fashion, and to have your character maligned and to fight so hard to regain, because you're guilty till you're proven innocent. I don't care what anybody says. I mean, I was in the newspaper every day. I was on Channel 10 News a week. I'd get news blasts from across the country. I mean, they made it very political. And to go from the breadwinner making six figures to being unemployed and having to break the promise to your wife that you got to go back to work was tough.
Right.
So my ordeal started like in 2012, like the Tuesday after Memorial Day. And I'm too German not to embrace a good fight. So I dedicated all of my energy in fighting to preserve my identity and my ability to provide for my family. And it cost. I'm sorry if I get choked up, but
no, take your time, man. It's I can't tell you how important it is for you to share. I mean, don't worry about it. It's
I put everything into that fight to try to get that back, because it's the only thing I knew, and it's the only thing I wanted to do. And I was failing. I got reinstated, and then I got run through the ringer again. My wife had to go back to work. She had to miss the mom years of high school. I was $250,000 in debt with legal fees. But it was either give up and not fight the good fight and show your kids it's okay to give up, or show the little guy that it isn't worth fighting for. When was there stuff that I did wrong? Yeah, everybody, there was some stuff that I could have done better, or maybe I should have been disciplined for, but to ruin my career, no. And not only did that cost me, as I thought I was failing as a person, as a father, as a husband. I had no identity. I was working at Gander Mountain selling guns and 5, 6, 7 days a week in the morning, and then I was working second shift as a security supervisor, making $35,000 a year. Where I was making six figures, wondering how I'm going to keep my house, and that just really piled up and created issues in my household to the point where I'm like, yeah, I'm better off not here. You got, hit me with a bus, you strike me with lightning, do something, because the insurance money is worth more than I am. And just one night, it just got to the point where I'm standing on that cliff with a Kimmer 1911, and the only reason I didn't do it is because of my kids, my parents, and my brother. At the time, the marriage, I wasn't sure where that was going. Thank God we were able to work that out.
But if they can make a good choice, because you're still married 26 years to Amber.
Yep.
So.
Yep. And I couldn't fail. My kids were my first priority, but, and this sounds bad, but I couldn't do that to my brother.
No, I don't, Dave. I got to say, like, nothing you're saying is bad. I'm glad, the decision that you made. I think, first of all, I can't thank you enough for sharing. I know it's tough to do. It's tough to admit that, to be honest with you, there's a lot of us, and I've thrown that out before. I've thought about it a lot. I haven't went that far as you, but I'm glad that it just needs to be something that brings you back. And like we said before, there's always something to bring you back. You just have to find that reason to come back. I can't tell you what the reason to come back is. I don't know. I'm not fully sure what my reason to come back is. I wish I could say it's, my kids or my dad or something like that. But it's more, I think my reason for coming back and not doing is this, I think it's a way of accepting defeat. And I've never taken that,
right.
That approach. And it's not, a lot of people don't like to hear that, but I just feel like that's how I look at it. But, again, thank you for sharing that. Dave, if you're listening, Otto, if you're listening, you should not harass your brother for the rest of the night. You definitely need to buy him a nice bottle of bourbon when he gets off of the painkillers. But if anyone's feeling the way like a lot of us has of veterans, firemen, police officers, definitely you need to call the Veteran Crisis Hotline. You can dial 988 or 1-800-273-8255 or press 1 and then press 1, or you can text 838-255. So like I said, I thank you for that. It kind of not to turn this back on me, but as the organization, what we're doing, because there's a lot of people behind the scenes that I think you're getting, people that have been guests here know that I'm not doing this by myself. There's a lot of people behind the scenes and this is what, this is what I've, what I've been wanting to do is for someone to be able to, people to continue to share their story, talk about how we all feel and that we've all thought this before, but the guys behind the scene, I thank you guys for everything you do. And then, and all the guests like you that have come on and shared your story. And when you said that earlier today, it's funny. It was one of those, like, I don't know. It's hard to say. It made me feel like I'm doing the right thing. You know what I mean? Because this takes up a lot of time. It takes up a lot of space. We have a new TV down here. It's a 75-inch TV. It's crazy. It takes up a lot of time and a lot of energy from, like I said, not just for me, but a lot of guys that you can't see behind the scenes if you haven't talked about them. Josh, we make fun of Nate a lot. He's going to give me a hard time. I'm going to say just like Master Sergeant Jason, like we're arguing about that. And Chad, who's there, it kind of like, I hope they feel the same way. It's really important for us to be able to bring people in and talk about these experiences, because I feel like that's the only way to stop what's happening at whatever rate. I mean, there's arguments. I was looking at today. It's crazy. You know, they're like talking about now the number's not 22 and it's going down. So it's fucking 18. Like, it's still not an acceptable number. I mean, it's just crazy. And it's funny. There is a lot of things that we've, you know, as a group, we've talked about this as an organization. Like, that's what we are now, right? We're an organization, I guess, guys. And, you know, there is a strong parallel between all the people that serve and give everything and that identity. You talked about the identity being ripped from you. It doesn't have to be ripped from you. That identity could be you leaving and on your own and on your own accord and want to do something else. And you said it earlier, we're always fighting for that. There's something we always knew that was inside of us. I think that's funny. If you talk to, you know, your brother will be like, hey, 9/11, or not 9/11, but Desert Storm was the reason that did that. But still, you know, when Desert Storm happened, you know, whatever the U.S. population, not everybody enlisted. There was something inside those people that they had to just need the spark. You know, the same thing, that happened in 9/11. So,
you know, one of the things I wanted to mention real quick, if I can, is if you guys touch one person, that's invaluable, because I had resources. I sent people to resources. I knew the number to call.
Right.
I had one of the guys, like my big brother, I mentioned him to you, you know, does stuff with Save a Warrior and
right.
PTSD. And I never had PTSD until that bullshit happened.
Yeah, but I would challenge that, though, because I probably think I would challenge that. I think that may have been, like, again, that spark of something. Like, a lot of us will say, like, we saw this and we did this or did that, but you know, you can compartmentalize a certain number of things, but it all starts at some way. It starts with, you know, it starts with a simple thing of, like, I mean, honestly, like, a lot of people in the military, you know, you talked about before, even like you just leave your family, you upend and you go somewhere. Like, there's all the things we've seen. There's nothing that we shouldn't ever say that what we saw we've kind of gotten used to, because it's not something we ever get used to. We've unfortunately, it's became a norm that isn't healthy for anyone. I mean, it's not healthy. 30 years of being a fireman isn't healthy. You know, 20 some years as a military person, it's not healthy. I mean, even like 5-6 years in serving the military, depending on where you went, it's not good. So there's different things that trigger. I would say that was the catalyst.
Yeah,
I don't know, the final
the
push.
fuse.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think there's all those things you've held. I mean, you didn't forget. You've said before you don't want to talk about. That's fine. Like, you remember the worst thing you've seen. I remember the worst thing I've seen. I choose not to talk about the worst thing I've seen. It just doesn't. I don't want to.
Doesn't do any.
I don't want to process. I don't want to speak that.
Right.
Because it doesn't do me any good. And also, I feel like it also, when you tell other people these things, I think there's a stigma sometimes. You tell someone, they look at you and you're not appalled, or you're not upset, and you think it's just a normal thing, and they look at you like another reason, like there's something wrong with you.
Right.
And I guess there is something wrong with us, but it's a good thing that's wrong with us. I think that's what we forget. So
yeah, I mean, you said the reason you never think that you didn't go that far down the road is because it was a sign of weakness. And
yeah, I think it's quitting.
And
I've never, like, I don't.
And I think that's a large reason why I didn't want to. Why I didn't is because I didn't. Number one, I didn't want my kids to have to live with that. And if I would have done it, I would have let the bastards win. And my dad used to have a Latin saying, and I'm not even going to try to remember it, but it was basically, don't let the bastards grind you down. And so that's part of why I continue to fight. But one of the reasons I wanted to share that is you never know if your story is going to touch just one person. And I'd mentioned in an email to you that there's been a couple times that just by answering the phone, there's at least 2 public safety people that are still walking today because I chose to answer the phone. And one was earlier this year. My phone rang at, like, I was down at Wayne's Lake House, and the phone rang about 11 o'clock at night. It was a text. I'm sorry, and it was from one of my former firefighters who's now a medically disabled cop. And he sent me a text and he goes, "I love you." Now that's pretty out of character.
I think I've sent those texts a lot.
That's pretty out of character at
A
11
lot.
o'clock at night. And I,
Not to my dad though.
right.
He's
right.
all, my dad's in the audience. He's getting all upset. I love you though, Dad. I do.
But I answered.
I know he won't answer it though, but
I answered that text. I said, "Hey, brother, are you okay?" And I didn't hear anything for hours and hours. I'm getting worried because it just was uncharacteristic of this individual. And the next day he called me. He goes, out of all the friends I have, he said, you were the only one that took time to answer my text. And he said, you're the only reason I didn't eat a bullet last night.
that's a lot of pressure. I mean, and we've talked about that before. I don't know I can't imagine that I'm the right person to talk to someone, but I have had that happen before. I don't know why, but I know that feeling. I mean, there's there's that loneliness you feel. Like there's sometimes that you're I don't know how to strike it. It's like you just want to matter, and I think it's hard. It's like I don't know this I don't know how to figure this out. I'm at a loss of words. Because of the whole thing of like, now you're talking about a whole level of, they're laughing about a loss of words in the background, but that feeling, I don't think a lot of people understand that feeling, that identity, that when you don't have that identity before, or that, like, it's not even identity, it's like the responsibility. Like there's, you're making jokes about the E4 mafia, right? Like there's a lot of E4s that were in charge of a lot of fucking shit, like millions of dollars in charge of people. Like, and we're not talking about like, whether they're coming to work, like life or death, responsible for people. And a lot of times you leave and you leave the military, you leave the fire department, you leave the police department, and now you're, you sell paint, that's what I do. Like I'm a paint supplier, and sometimes I struggle about like, I still to this day still struggle. Like this is not like, if you were to go back and say I was going to be a paint supplier, I would have been like, who the hell are you talking about? But it's hard to do that. But I mean, it's key, like I said before, like if one person helps, like I don't, I know we flash up the number all the time, and I'm not taking that away, but that may not be the right person. And I don't, that's the thing. I think that if you're asking me about what's going on with veteran suicide, that is not the answer to some people. There's many people that the only people that understand us is us. I don't know if that's the way to do that. Like they understand it. No, and not even us sometimes, but that person that you feel comfortable with it, that they may not have served, but they understand you. That you're not afraid for them to judge you, because that's a lot of things with me. It's like when I talk about stuff, I'm most afraid of the judgment back, if that makes sense. And I think that's hard to take. When you how someone's going to judge you, that's why I'm afraid to say a lot of things that I say, because that's my biggest fear, and that's why I don't talk to my family much about things, because I don't want them to like look at me or feel differently about me. They can think I'm an asshole, which they probably do. But I don't want them to think, I'm a deranged asshole, I guess is a better way to put it.
My kids already know that about me.
Yeah, no, I mean, but it is, it's important. I mean, like you said before, like sharing, I can't tell you, Dave, it's huge for you to come on and share that. A lot, like I think, anybody there's a lot of people have been in your shoes, and the only way it's going to change is if, people like you are and I are honest about that. We've thought about that. Like there's 100 times that I've thought about it, but the number one thing for me was quitting. That's, I feel like you're a failure, like you, and that's not how I was ever raised. But whatever, if you don't feel that same way, if it's you love your wife or your kids, we all do, but it's like you got to find that reason. But the best reason of all to me is not to let somebody else win, because it's a no-win situation. It's a win situation for you because you're gone, but it's a loss for everyone else. And there's not a single person that I know personally that have dealt with that. But as I research more and more about, we'll talk about the Patriot that we honor tonight. But as you dive into that, there's not a single person that's like, oh, I'm glad that you're in a better place. That's not the case. There's a lot of guilt on them, and they're not in a better place. So I'm glad that Otto was the reason why. And I'm sure if he's listening, I'm sure that he appreciates that. And he definitely made the best decision. And it's a decision that we all can make. It's a pretty easy decision to just say, hey, I choose to keep fighting, and it's going to get better. And it has gotten better, right?
It has. I'm not sure what God's plan is for me as far as a career. I miss the adrenaline. I miss the public service, but now I focus on being a good husband, a good father, a good friend, a good brother, and that's what my focus is, to just enjoy whatever life gives me. I know that we'll dedicate this session to a veteran, but for me, one of the reasons I wanted to come on, not only for the veteran side of it, but one of my former captains, his son grew up in the fire station up in Wisconsin while I was there, and was several years older than my son. But in July or August of 2017, he was a Memphis firefighter, and he took his own life. So, for me, this is a kind of a memory of Grant Langer from Memphis, and I saw the pain that his father and mother still go through. And so Lance, if you ever listen to this, you're always in my thoughts, buddy.
Yeah, and so I'll touch base with David. We'll pull up some stuff about him, and we'll definitely post something on the page. It's one of those things. We've started with a niche of the word Patriot is like a pretty broad term. We're sticking for the military for a while, but it does. We do have bigger plans for it to incorporate everybody else. I do 100% believe that the firemen that protect our in our houses and our lives, and the policemen that enforce the laws here, they're patriots in the same way as all of us that decided to just do it in a different place, which is always interesting. We decided to go do that somewhere else except for home, and it's always right. Sometimes I think it's harder to do it at home than it was in other places, personally. So that is crazy. I mean, what the funny thing about Dave is, I have to share this, is 2 weeks ago, it was so funny to watch you just you and your brother go back and forth. And actually it's been very hard to get some people to come on and share their story. And it was crazy. Dave, you were like super hardcore, like I'll come on. Like I love to share my story. And now I know why at the time you didn't, give me all the details, but I had originally scheduled, I think in like March, right? That's how far we're out. And then on the Marine Corps birthday, our Marine that we had scheduled had a family emergency. I'm not giving him a hard time. So it was crazy. Like I immediately, I looked at the list, and really quickly I'm like, Dave, can you do it? And within like a minute, he's like, I'm in. So I really appreciate you filling in. It's really good. Like what and before you shared that with me today, I was kind of a little worried that we didn't have a Marine on, but I feel like you talked about before, like God's will, or however you want to talk about it, things happen for a reason. And I think there was a reason why he didn't come on today, for you to come share your story. And I really appreciate that and filling in at such quick notice. So, so what are you doing now? What's work? What's work now? You're not a fireman. We know that.
No, I work for a company called TIBA. It's wasn't an Israeli-based company. Now we were bought by an Italian group, and what we do is we specialize in parking technology. So if you go to the Columbus airport and you pull into one of their lots and you get a ticket and you go in, or you go to a lot that has license plate recognition, or you go around Columbus and use the smart city function where you pull an app up on your phone, and
where I got a ticket at Who Farted because I didn't see the sign. Thanks, Dave. Like I liked you until now.
So we do all of that technology. It's nothing that I was trained to do. It utilizes my planning and my management skills. But when I first started with the company, I managed the installation department, and I'm happy to report that I don't miss managing people. I manage myself, and I make the same amount of money, and my life is stress-free.
I like that. I like that thing too. Like the thing as a leader, like it's always be like, I want to be in charge of so many people. I have a hard enough time keeping Che in check. So so I like that. I don't I don't like not being in charge of people anymore. Like people, I'm like, I'm okay with that. Like people are always like, oh, like, and the thing about like I make that as partly joking, but there is a leaf of it to be able to just control yourself,
right,
and worry about yourself. It does make life a lot easier. It can make it boring though sometimes, I think, right?
Yeah. It's low stress. Again, we've adjusted. It was a huge hit income wise, but we're enjoying life. My wife and I, the kids we're sort of empty nesters. Both the kids moved out, and now my son is living back at home while he's on this rear detachment deployment. our daughter.
How excited are you for that, though? For real?
We love having them.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
just not
We the daughter lives right down at the opposite end of the street. So my wife and I are enjoying some freedoms and making memories, just the two of us, and get to see the kids whenever we want.
Yeah. My 22-year-old's living with us. I love it, except for 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning when he's playing Call of Duty, screaming like at the top of his lungs. I think someone's broken into the house. And
well, I did have to remind my
kinda figure
son
it out.
that he needs to.
And he drinks a lot of my beer.
I had
Thank God he's not into whiskey
Drinks
because
my
he would be
beer.
fucking dead. Yeah, he actually drinks other people's beer too.
But I had to
That's a true story.
I had to remind my son that he needs to tell me when he's coming in at 2 o'clock, so he isn't staring down the barrel of a gun.
Yeah, I'm okay with him coming at 2 o'clock in the morning. My thing is like 2:30 in the morning when I hear blood curdling screams like somebody's dying, and it's because he's yelling with someone about video games. Like the video game, I don't understand the video game thing. I like them, but the emotion that it brings out in them, it's just crazy. Like, and I'm deaf. Like I probably am like legally deaf. And if you wake me up at 2:30 in the morning, you're really loud, and then I just go into that mode of like something's wrong.
Right.
And so if you're listening, Ben, you probably aren't. Like you're probably like 2 or 3 screams away from getting hit in the back of the head with a baseball bat over there on your gaming system. So no, but I wouldn't change it at all. I mean, it's kind of the opposite. It's funny. My dad's here. I couldn't wait to get away, right? To like spread your wings, whatever you call it. And that's actually my biggest fear now is my kids to go away. So it's funny now to fast forward a few years and kind of be afraid. Like I'm happy for his career, but I'm like happy for him to be here. I'll let him scream at 2:30 in the morning.
I tell you the weirdest.
It's crazy. The empty nester thing's weird. We're in that age. Like I got my youngest is 17. He's about to go. Hopefully, Gabe. No, I'm kidding. No, I love him a lot. Like and my wife gets mad because I call him my stuff. Like she doesn't like this. I call him my stuff. Like I like having my stuff where I can like touch it and like. I don't always want to play with my stuff or like talk to my stuff, but I just want to be able to like. It's my stuff. Like so I feel comfortable. I feel at ease when I know they're here. I know they're not in danger. It's just crazy. So it's funny. The exact opposite of how I used to feel. It was like I would be like to my dad and my mom, like, "What the hell is your problem? I'm leaving. I'm gonna go do that." So
tell you the hardest thing that my wife and I had to do, even though we knew he wasn't going to Iraq or Afghanistan, was to send our son off on that deployment to Kuwait and Saudi, and knowing that there was occasional missile launch into one of those countries, but to be at Fort Bliss and send him away for a year, not knowing whether he was going to come home again, that was rough.
no, I agree. I always think it's funny because I feel guilty when like a lot of my we're getting old.
Yeah,
I mean, you're older than me, thank God. I like having older guests, but it's like. I've got classmates that have sons that are going to our college we went to, and there's like this huge like I'm super excited that they're serving the military, but I'm glad mine aren't in some weird ways. And I don't know if that's like I feel good, but I don't feel good about that cycle breaking. I don't know if that's a good thing. I'm glad that they're doing other things that hopefully they serve the world in a better place. Because honestly, like at the time, like when you've talked about a little bit, when you talk about your family and not liking it, like I could not understand ever how my mom didn't think that I was going to join the military, that this wasn't what I wanted to do. And like, and I get so mad about like, how can you be so petty that you'll hold me back and all this kind of stuff. And like, now that, fast forward, like I'm the same, I feel like I'm the same person. So now there's a lot of times that I'm just like thankful. I honestly don't know if I can handle that. I mean, I don't know if I could. I don't know if
the one thing I'll share,
I would feel that good about that. You know what I mean?
Do you remember that feeling that you had when you saw your firstborn?
Ben, I do actually, Ben, I do.
All right, I'll look over. Did your dad come to see you get commissioned?
Actually, my dad gave me my first salute.
Okay.
Right.
And Dad, what was that feeling?
Oh, he's going to my dad.
That
my dad.
That feeling.
You should make him come on the camera because he will not come on the camera. Everybody, my dad will not. I actually have the silver. I actually have the dollar. He actually gave me the dollar that I gave him. He doesn't even know that. He gave me a bunch of stuff. He's moved around a couple times. He's like giving away stuff. I actually have the silver dollar that I gave my dad from my first salute up in my bedroom. So
what I can say is that when I saw my son graduate basic training and I was there, it gave me the same feeling of when he was born. And unfortunately, with my daughter being medically separate, I didn't get to have that experience. But when she swore in, I felt that same feeling. And to me, for him to carry on, for those two to be fourth generation.
No, 100%. Like your family, but I agree. I mean, I'm breaking. My kids are breaking the tradition, but there's a part of me that feels super bad. But there's a part of me that like I'm glad. Like I don't care what anybody says. Even if you want to do it, this is what you wanted to do. And even if it's the military, the police department, the fire department, it sacrifices a lot for as you as a person, and it sacrifices a shit ton for your family, who really don't understand what you're doing. And I don't think we really understand. Like we say, this is great, we're going to do all this kind of stuff. And a lot of us, I think that's where that number comes from. We do all these things for everyone else. It's always for everyone else. Like all these things we do for someone else. And then the people that want it from us the most, we don't have the time for them. Right. And it's hard for me to break that habit nowadays. I'm like, I go to work, I still do all these kind of things. I have extracurricular activities like this, but I know I'm guilty of, sometimes my son just wants me to one of my sons just wants to just talk and have me. And that's the hard part. And I think that's what drives in we do these things. And then like when it's over with, like whether it got pulled out of, from underneath you, like, the rug underneath you, or you retire, you're left with that decision. And that decision doesn't always taste right, smell right, feel right. And I think that's what happens to a lot of us. I mean, we do these things like I don't know anybody that's like, we have one guy that we know that's deploying right now. He's been pretty open to us behind the scenes about not wanting to go, but he's not going to verbally throw out there or quit his career that he's not going to go deploy. I mean, and that's a problem. I mean, he's leaving 2 young girls, his wife, and those actions have consequences that unfortunately a lot of us, we don't address it. Right. And it gets the best of us. And so I'm 80% happy. My kids aren't 20% no, but I know you understand the feeling. Like I see my friends' kids that are serving, that are down the road, and I feel proud. I'm like, that'd be cool to one of my sons be a Marine pilot or like whatever, but I'm also cool with them not doing that. Right. You know what I mean? And
you talk about,
I don't know if that's selfish for me or whatever. I don't know.
I mean, it isn't for, military isn't for everybody. You talked about getting so engrossed in the giving to other people. I can remember one time I was, and being a new chief, I was that particular department in Wisconsin. I was on call 5 days a week. So 7 a.m. on Monday morning till 7 p.m. on Friday. If there was a call, I was going.
Yeah.
And one time I'm at home, I'm on my phone, I'm doing something, and here comes my little son Ian, and he taps on my leg, and I look up, and he looks at me, and he goes, "Daddy, when's my time?"
Yeah.
And that was like tearing my heart out. It's like,
go talk to your mom.
Yeah, buddy. I promise I'll. But they over the course of my career with a family, they suffered the most.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, like tomorrow's Veterans Day. I would say this before. Tomorrow is going to be everybody like thanking veterans. I 100% think you need to always thank our families. In one of our bourbon groups, a guy put up a donation for something, or a free bottle for something that has to do with the people that support us. The families, anybody that's done that. There's no way we could do this without us, without the support. That's a huge thing. The families are really the ultimate people that I think that the sacrifice. I think. However, I think we all sacrifice. I think we all feel every veteran feels bad when you leave, you miss something. You can't get that back. And a lot of the times, especially now, what's going on with I look at like Afghanistan and that throws me into the tailspin because of what happened, recently and how we left there. It really makes me think like, Jesus Christ, like I gave up that for it. What was the real reason for it? There's a lot of things that do that. So But the bottom line is you can come back from all this stuff. I think that's the thing is like, if you're married to someone, your spouse, they understand you, right? I don't know how, but they do, right? And honestly, I think your kids ultimately understand you and how you feel. Like my dad's here, and hopefully we can get him where you're sitting soon. But my dad taught me how to be successful in the military. It came with that sacrifice. My dad, I thought it was normal. You do your job, right? My dad's dedicated to the military. You know what that means? Then I don't get to see my dad as much. You know what I mean? It works out. I see my dad more than a lot of people do. He lives close to us now. I don't see him as much as I want, but it's better than what it was before. But I think the whole thing of it just goes down to, I think you talked about the whole thing, the parallel of the I think it's identity is the key thing. Right. I think you talked about that. That's that identity that it's who we were. It's not who we are. Right? Does it make sense?
Yeah, it does. Because you were talking.
Like I could have been a high school football phenom, right? That's who you were, not who you are.
Like
baseball,
like Otto wasn't.
Like my kids, come on. I gotta have my dad talk to my kids because my kids still don't think that I could hit the ball better than them, but that's fine. But it's right. That's who you were. Like, so you have to put that back that you can be successful in different ways. It doesn't have to be running into fires. It doesn't have to be jumping out of airplanes. It doesn't have to be, putting rounds down range. It doesn't have to be kicking indoors. There's life is long. Life's a marathon, right? It's a different identity, and I that's hard for some people to grasp, and I think that's an important thing. I think identity is the key, though.
Yeah, I think one of the common threads between the military and public safety is that if we're called tomorrow to go do it, even today as a short, fat 52-year-old, I'd go try to do it.
No uniforms that fit me, by the way. No.
Yeah, well, mine wouldn't either. But when you look at what's going on in the world, and I saw a TikTok video where the veteran was saying, and I've had this conversation with my friends that have sons or daughters in the military. If the balloon went up in Ukraine and we got sucked into there or China or somewhere else, they can send me. I mean, I don't move fast. I'm not as concealable, but I still shoot straight as compared to, don't take my son over there for that bullshit. I've lived a long life. You send me before you send them.
Yeah, I think we all lived those days of like we could. Wasn't there a song like I'm as young once as ever, whatever the song is. Yeah. I think we all feel that way, but God help us if they ever call us back up. I mean, it'd be a bunch of bitching. I'd 50-year-olds that like I'd be so pissed. Like number one, I'd be like, somebody better have fucking bourbon. If we don't have bourbon, like as long as I had bourbon, I'd be good. If there's no bourbon for like a month, there's gonna be a problem. And then I'd be more crotchety about sleeping. Like that's the thing. Like I could go without eating. Could probably fit in better.
See, they'd have to put me on meal team 6.
But like we would be the most. That would be the worst thing that ever happened. They'd be like, Jesus Christ, you guys go back. Like, forget about it now. But it's not our time. Like, there's other people that they're answering the call. Your son Ian's answering the call. Yeah. Your daughter Kendall did. There's a ton of other people. Like, we've had Austin on. There's a lot of young kids that it's their time. Like, that's like I said before. And I think the hard thing that it's in our past. It's who we were. It's not who we are. That's an important thing for me. That took a long time for me to understand. Like you said before, your identity. That was my I talk about like the quitting, but that's the thing is like it's in the past. Like it's who I was. It's not who I am now. And there's do I wish that was the same me? No, because that me was not really a good person, to be honest with you. I wasn't connected to anything other than the military and everything the military did. I mean, like I remember coming home and my wife would say, like, should we enroll like Ben in like soccer? And I'd be like, why are you bothering me with this shit? I've been doing this all day. You just figured it out. That's correct. So that's the key. Is that I think you hit it on the head. I don't know. I try to every time I talk about this is to find something to like, throw it up and hope it sticks. But identity is key. I think that does happen. The identity of who you are, and then also the people. I mean, you talked about in the first 5 minutes, the people in the military, you become super close. I don't think a lot of people understand the guys in my, I was in a military school and an all military company and all male company. I'm sorry. And those guys mean the world to me. I mean, they still do. We talk and it's funny that people above that were, in charge of me, I still do things to make them proud of me. And this was, how many 30 some years ago. So that's the hard thing. But you can find that somewhere else. I mean, I've like, to be honest with you, the guys that are helping me do this, it means a lot. I mean, there's only, there's 2 of them in the military and 3 of them that were never in the military. And it's a bond that I know I can post something in a chat group we have and say, I love you guys. And most likely, probably all of them will answer, you know what I mean? Except for Jason, because his wife is always like, you can't talk to Jay after 10 o'clock.
I don't want to talk to Jay after 10 o'clock.
Yeah, you do. You do. That's all right. I mean, Sean says you can't, but you do. I just call him early to make sure he's up early because he's he's supposed to be up early working out. But you can find the identity. You can find those people. I'm only gonna joke about it because he got a new job and he was talking about where he had a lot of flexibility in the old job. And now he doesn't. And one of the things he said to me, he's like, what I got to do is get up early and work out because he's used to working out in the afternoon. I'm like, there is no fucking way. If you've been in the military long enough, you're going to get up and work out in the morning. So I've been calling him as early as I could. I'm going to call earlier. He's asleep. He's not. No one. Anybody that gets out of the military and is working out at 6:30 in the morning, you're a psycho. You're a psychopath. You're a psychopath.
I made a commitment that if I was getting up early after all that bullshit in the military, it was because somebody's shit was burning up or I was going deer hunting.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, you hear these people talk about like get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, all this kind of stuff. I'm like, bro, I am not getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning unless I fucking have to. And it better be a really good reason, like to work. Like
I'm 52.
I'm not getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning.
I get up at 5 a.m. to go pee.
Yeah.
And then I go back to bed.
That's true. That's true. Good point. No, but I mean, when we're talking about I think what we're trying to say, making jokes about is that you will find those people that are out there. You'll find that next identity. You'll find that next group of people. You just have to search for it. You can't live in the past. You can't be, this is who I was or who I am. It's like, we've all changed. I mean, if you go back, I guarantee if those guys that I talked to, I don't know how many on the chat, actually one of them that I'm actually closer to now, Tom, if you're listening, center, he was my cadre. Like, I fucking hated him. Like with a passion, and I've had this conversation with him, but I talk to him more than anybody else now. Like now he just retired as a fire chief. It's just different to like things change. You change. You talking to that person or knowing that person now and what they believe. It's a huge difference. And I think that's what we have to do as veterans, as public servants, is you have to keep moving forward. You always have to keep trying. Like you can't live in what the past used to be, how great the past used to be, or how bad the past used to be. It's a past, Yeah,
I think my mission now is just my new identity is just trying to be like I said earlier, a good husband, a good father, and a good human being.
Yeah, you're making me feel bad because I feel like I'm doing none of those things sometimes.
But you're talking about reconnecting. My brother and I were able to reconnect with our 7th grade teacher, who's was a Marine in Vietnam, and so we've gotten to spend some time with him and just sharing stories. He was the guy you never wanted to get whacked by, and if he might be listening because I invited him. So Mr. Swearingen, if you're on here, this is a happy Marine Corps birthday to you, there, Double Dog. But we spent a weekend with him at Wayne's Lake House, and it was one of the best weekends, reminiscing. And his whole thing in life right now is reconnecting with students that he had as a high school or as a grade school teacher and principal, and seeing what impact he's had on their lives. And even though I'm the misfit of all the people that he's probably hung out with, it's just a great time.
Yeah, but you're down in South Carolina. And,
yeah,
he's loving it.
Yeah.
Otto Wayne's. He did recently invite us. Thanks, finally, Otto, to go there. But
yeah,
no, but I think it's just I can't thank you enough for sharing that experience. I think this is what I want to do, and like you said before, if it helps one person, that's super important. I'm glad you made the right choice, and I'll continue to stick by that. And I get a lot of criticism from some people about it, but it's a bad choice. It needs to be said. There's way better choices.
Yeah,
any choice other than that is better. Like, so you're not going. It's not going well with your wife. you can get a divorce. It'll be all right. Like you got fired from a job, you'll get another job. That choice is just a bad choice.
I think the key words for me is don't let the bastards grind you down.
It's a good. We got to look at the Latin term for that. I think.
I'll send it to you. I have it. It's
illegitimate non-carborundum.
Yes,
is that right? Yeah.
It's something like that. Yes,
I think that's an old Echo term, like the guys know. I think that actually is our old Echo company motto.
Yep,
illegitimate non-carborundum instead. I think, but
that's it.
This is kind of creeping me out a little bit. I mean, like I picked the quote the Echo guys. That's actually our company quote. Don't let the bastards get down. It's cool, but what are you doing over there, Jason?
Don't worry about it.
Don't get in front of the big TV now. We have like a crazy TV. It's like it's the weirdest. So you guys have noticed that I'm probably looking up a lot. Like we had a very nice donation from an anonymous donor. So we have a TV. I don't know how much my family is digging this. I really like it. Nobody else likes it, but I don't care at this point. It's really it's an excess. It's huge.
Nice. I'm surprised your son hasn't hijacked it for his video.
Someone will. It's inevitable. But so I guess I think we reached the culmination. I think of the night. I'd say it's time. Like I said before, please on the side send me the information on the young man you talked about. You already took away my quote. I feel like that's.
I thought somebody put it up there. I didn't.
No, they did. It's like, but I'm really glad. I was like that quote. I knew it was gonna like hopefully. But actually, we haven't reached the end of the night because I want to talk about one more thing. So you didn't talk about it, but you actually went to become an officer. You went to OCS like your brother did. You said that in almost like in that 15-minute conversation, you said like your biggest disappointment was that your grandfather wasn't able to pin you, right?
Right.
Pin your
So
for most of the people that know like pin rank or see you get commissioned as an officer.
Yeah. So I originally in 1990.
And then you said, hold on. Then you said not graduating from Walden was your biggest. You said
mistake.
So what's the biggest mistake? Not graduating from OCS.
Well,
not finishing.
There's a difference between regret and mistake. My two regrets that I wake up every single morning and I think about are not getting my Eagle Scout, and my son. My brother and I had to kick his butt across the line to get his Eagle Scout. And
that's getting harder and harder nowadays, though.
But it's so easy.
I think it's easy, but like growing up for us, like we're the same time frame. That was like difficult. So nowadays, with all the distractions, I think it's even harder to do that now.
Well,
Wouldn't you agree? That's the only thing that's gotten harder.
Yeah, the two distractions that got me were fumes, car fumes and perfumes, and so that's why I didn't get it. So not getting my Eagle Scout and then not graduating OCS. So in 91, I went to OCS, and you spend the first couple drills at the military academy down. It used to be at Rickenbacker, and then you spend 2 weeks. At that point in time, it was at Battle Creek, Michigan. So a couple of nights before we were due to leave to come back. So you do that 2 week period, and then you come back and you do like 8 months of weekend drills, and then you do another 2 week period, and then you get commissioned. In Ohio, it was a federal commission as a second lieutenant. So it was almost all the way through that first summer camp, and we did a night land nav class and a course, and I got up, and it was like a missile shot up through my back. I strained something in my back. At the time, the guard had cut college down to 60%. So 40% of college I was paying for out of my pocket, riding an ambulance and a fire truck. And I couldn't risk screwing my back up any further. So I did a letter of resignation. And then Otto decided that he was going to go to OCS. So I went back with him. And at that point in time, I had a really bad attitude. I went to a couple of the drills and I said, I don't have time for this bullshit.
You've been a 77-year-old second lieutenant.
Yeah. I said, well, I was only 21 at that time.
I'm joking.
I said, I don't have time for that bullshit. So
it's a young man's game. It's a young woman's game.
I didn't go back. And so my goal was I wanted to follow in my grandfather's footsteps. I wanted to be an infantry officer. I wanted him to pin me at graduation. And that never happened. But with Walden, so back in 2005, I had a dilemma. I told my wife, I said, I'm really thinking about going back to get my doctorate because I loved school and I wanted to take
Which is funny to hear because you said you
I hated it.
school.
Hated it in high school. And
Right.
but I'm like, I want to take it as far as I can go. And being a student of leadership and change, I was going to go get a doctorate in organizational leadership and change. And I got halfway through the program, and at the time, at Miami Township, we were going through a merger with the city to merge the fire departments, and it was getting very political and screwed up. And I very easily could have sat in my office 5 days a week and concentrated on completing my doctorate degree, but I chose to fight for the organization that we built and make sure that it got merged in the right way, which meant I paid a lot of money and did no work. So I burned out and never went back to finish it. So
It's not never though. You still have a chance.
I still have a chance, but I think if I ever broach that subject with my wife, I'd be over across from
You're like
Carmel
Amber,
in my,
go
in
back
my
to
cemetery plot.
No, I was talking to somebody earlier in the week about education, like vocational education, college education. Education is what can lift you to new heights. I think that's the fun thing. Like I'm the first person in my family to go to college, first person to have a master's degree. I also thought about getting a doctorate only because I wanted to be like, if I take one more step, then it's gonna be harder for somebody to pass me. But I hope my kids do. Is like education, like you said, was a failure. But I think anytime you try something, it's not a failure, right?
Yeah,
you have a lot of debt. You have if you did it for a reasonable reason. I'm not talking about doing something like just totally, asinine crazy. But I would without education, I don't think I better my family name or my kids like I have a different level. I mean, I don't think I'm any different than my parents were. They taught me hard work, but the next step is like my kids and I kind of challenge them to like knock me off that top thing. But like you said, that was a disappointment. I get a disappointment, but you gave it a shot, and that's all that matters. Like sometimes you just gotta give it a shot, right?
Yeah. I mean,
you gotta dry age meat. You gotta you gotta do what you're doing. Like you gotta find your gig. It wasn't a dig to someone out there. You know what I'm talking about.
It wasn't going to make me any more money as a fire chief. For me, it was more of a personal thing. But one of the things I wanted to do, and I still do some of it, is consult with agencies, emergency service agencies, for organizational development. And one of the things that I'm trying to, and I have several buddies that have published books, and that's been one of my goals is to publish basically a survival guide for fire chiefs. So how do you survive similar situations where you get into the political turmoil? How do you see it coming? If you get in it, how do you survive it? Because there are way too many stories of people getting run through the grinder and they have no idea how to survive it. And while I didn't survive it career-wise, I did survive it personally, and there's some lessons to be learned. So over the next year, that's my goal is to pen a book and try to get it published.
Oh, so you're giving yourself a year?
That's
putting on like the PDCA a year. You got to give your guideline like I do like 18 months. So it's like a year to write a book is.
All right, we'll say 18 months.
All right, 18 months from today, we're gonna have a book. We'll be talking about our second author here that we've had on there. But no, that's what you got to keep doing. And you got to find what what motivates you every day.
Right.
And that's important. I mean, that's cool to do. So you talked about the one thing before I let you go now. You sent a couple pictures of a gentleman with a Congressional Medal of Honor. Like,
yes.
Who was that? I didn't post that. So because I tried to put, the funny thing is I'm like plug and play. Every time I try to put him in the picture, it cut people's heads off. And I was like, fuck it, I don't have time for this. It's like, let's move on. I'll ask you about it. So there's a couple pictures you sent with a gentleman with a CIB, Congressional Medal of Honor.
Right. So in 2000,
not your grandfather though.
No.
Okay.
No. In 2008, my wife and I sat on the Veterans Memorial Committee in Miami Township, and we worked with the community and the other committee members to get a Veterans Memorial at the township building. And they wanted to get a guest speaker. So I went to the National Medal of Honor Society and saw that there were 2 living Medal of Honor recipients in Ohio, one from Vietnam, one from Korea. So I reached out and they put me in contact with Sergeant First Class Ron Rosser. And he passed last year. But Ron was from Roseville, just outside of Zanesville. And he worked in the mines with his father. He then went into the Army, served a stint in the Army, got out. The Korean War kicked up. His younger brother got killed. So he's like, screw that. I'm going back in. I'm going to kill as many Chinese as I can. That was his sole goal, was to avenge his brother's death. So he was a forward observer, gets assigned to this brand new company. Nobody knows his name. They get all shot up. He goes up and down the mountain as a corporal. And I think by all accounts, it was a couple hundred Chinese that he had killed. Was awarded the Medal of Honor. So to hear, my son and I got to have breakfast with him, and I had challenge coins for my fire chief's position. So I gave my son a challenge coin, and he slid it across the table to Sergeant Rosser, and Sergeant Rosser got a big smile, and he says, "Young man, I imagine you want something." And my son's like, so he slides across this Medal of Honor coin, a copy of his citation and a picture of him with the president. And then he goes on later that day to do the keynote for this veterans memorial dedication. But his story is really interesting because a colonel comes out and says, Sergeant Rosser or Corporal Rosser, you've been nominated for the Medal of Honor. You got to come off the front line. He's like, with all due respect, fuck you. I've got killing to do. I'm not coming off the front line. So the colonel goes back, and the general calls the colonel and says, where's Corporal Rosser? He refuses to come off the front line. You're a colonel. He's a corporal. Go get his ass off the front line. So he goes back out and has the same discussion. And Sergeant Rosser's like, I know enough to know you can nominate it for me. Nominate me for it. I also know enough that I don't have to take it. So I got things to do. Well, they yanked him off the front line, and he gets a Medal of Honor. He goes on to do some things with air assault and Pathfinder stuff. Vietnam War rolls around. He's still in the Army. His other younger brother gets killed in Vietnam. So he's lost 2 brothers, one in Korea, one in Vietnam. He goes in and he wants a combat assignment. And they're like, you're a Medal of Honor recipient. You're not going. He says, screw you. And he got out of the Army. And then his daughter went on to serve. He later went on to serve as like a Florida sheriff's deputy or a Florida sheriff. His daughter and granddaughter went on to serve. So that's how we met him, and that's how we got his coin.
That's cool. Yeah, there's always like I think that I've talked about it before. I think I've met 4 Medal of Honor recipients. That's crazy when you meet them. They're super humble people. They're humble, but I think they know what they've done. But then like every time you read something about them, you're like, holy Christ, they've been through like the worst experience. But I thought that was an eye-catching thing. I did try to get them the pictures, and my I need more support from Josh to.
It was probably
those photos.
It was probably a formatting thing.
No, but I thought that was cool. Like, I mean, it is crazy to see. I think if anybody that's ever met a Medal of Honor recipient, it's humbling. Like when you meet them, and like one of my favorite ones. I don't know if I've said it before, but I was actually in Afghanistan, and there was a major. He was a med service corps officer, but he was awarded. Well, he was nominated for the Medal of Honor in Vietnam, and it took like. It was one of those things like all the political process, something happened, but he got it awarded like 2 years before, like 2000, he got awarded this. And so he's a major now in med service corps. He was a medic before, and he starts talking to us about winning, like how he got awarded the Medal of Honor. And he's telling the story, and it's like the most boring story I've ever heard. He's like, that's a bad day. Like I'm a medic, and like, we get ambushed, and I'm just like, aiding people and giving them ammo, and then like we're like, you read the citation, you're just like, holy Christ, like somebody needs to get this guy a public affairs officer to do it. But like everybody, it's there that if you ever get a chance to meet them, I don't care where they're at, if they're speaking at like the VFW or whatever, you have to go meet them, you have to go talk to them. Or
just take a moment to go to the Medal of Honor Society and watch their individual testimonies. I mean, it's not
Yeah,
as cool, but it's still cool.
I think no, it is. I mean, I think that if you watch all the stories, like I think there's something to meet to meet people because they're truly heroes. Like you see them and they're the most humble people you've ever met. The 4 people I've never met them that was like, I'm a Medal of Honor winner. Like they're very humble.
I was in a room with 20 or 25 of them at one time.
That'd be cool.
So we were at a convention down in Nashville, and I'm on the elevator with after I left the fire service, I was working for 2 of my firefighter paramedics at a startup company. So we're down there for a conference, and we're on the elevator, and I happen to look over and I see this guy in a suit, and I see the floret. And I'm like, sir, I said, I don't know your name, but you're an American hero. Thank you. And he shook my hand. And later I went and looked up who he was. And his name escapes me now, but we get off the elevator and they're like, who in the hell was that? I said, that was a Medal of Honor recipient. They're like, well, how the hell do you know that? I'm like, well, those 2 were never in the military, so they didn't understand what it was. So later on, we're coming back down and we go out into the lobby of the hotel, and there are 20 or 25 Medal of Honor recipients. And Nashville had invited them in, and they dedicated a boulevard as the Medal of Honor recipient boulevard. And so I went up to several of them and just thanked them. I mean, I said, I don't want to take much of your time. I just want to shake your hand and say thank you for your sacrifice for this country.
It is amazing. I mean, if you read it, I will say if you see them like go, it's amazing. All of them. And then the favorite thing is to talk to them, and then honestly read what they actually did, or like a lot of them. What's funny is you don't have to read it; you can watch a movie about them. They've done some amazing things. So
this thing with Ron Rosser is my boss, who had never been in the military. His assistant, who was in the military, former Marine, but was serving in the Coast Guard Reserves, decided that they were going to get challenge coins made to commemorate this occasion, and so they gave me a challenge coin to give Sergeant Rosser, and they give it to me in the plastic. I'm like, there's no way I'm handing this Medal of Honor recipient a coin in the plastic. So I'm taking the challenge coin out of the plastic. Where do you think the coin's made?
Oh, no.
Korea.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God.
But so the fun thing, like the challenge coin's a funny thing. This is interesting. Like we're talking about the challenge coin. A lot of people don't know what that is. So the military people do, but it's funny how the challenge coin is like progressed to everybody has a challenge coin right now, Jason. Like it feels like, yeah, it's like gotten pretty, like when I was in, like a challenge coin was like general officer, like command sergeant major, but like I see like somebody actually approached me like, you should make Pours with Patriots challenge coins. I'm just like, no, like I mean it's but I think with the time, like what's happened is like technology, like to make those before was super hard, like super expensive. Now everybody's like banging them out. Like the challenge coin, like I knew it was if you had a challenge coin, right, and somebody else had one, right, or you thought they had one, you could bring it out and say, hey, I challenge, there's my coin. If they didn't, they had to buy you a drink,
right?
And then if they did, you had to buy the round. So
right.
Like I remember being like a young lieutenant and like carrying like actually I had like a pouch made with all these things. You carry all these ones you thought somebody would do, but like now it's crazy. Like all these organizations are handing out like it's funny. I have a case upstairs that's hidden away, but there's a bunch of like the challenge coins. I can't imagine handing a challenge coin to like your son. Like I get like a young kid, but to hand like a Medal of Honor winner any kind of challenge coin, I'd be like, maybe I'm not going to give him that.
He had never seen
because he's like, like I mean,
he had never seen the fire chief's one. I mean, he was
that is cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the fire. I like to see how I do like how it's broadened, but like
the other thing was poker chips. Have you ever seen the poker chips? So
I've seen some poker chips.
Yeah, because of the cost of the challenge coins, a lot of military units and public safety went to poker chips. But I buried.
Rudy doesn't like poker chips. I was upset with him barking up there.
I buried one of my challenge coins with both my grandfathers, my father, and a good friend of ours, a lieutenant commander in the Navy that was killed. All went to rest with one of my challenge coins.
I'm not dissing. It's just it's funny that's become so common. So
it's like commercialized now.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Like Jason, you have a challenge coin as the first time?
No.
Because I was gonna be like, that motherfucker didn't give me one. He's out. He'd never be out because he made some pretty good fried rice tonight. So
excellent.
So now that I think that's all I was going to ask you. Again, I can't thank you for like things happen for a reason. Like 2 weeks ago, your brother was on. Like you reached out to me like the next day saying, "Hey, Ludwig, come on, thank you for filling in." Because I want to make fun of the Marines, but he has a really good reason for not being here. But we'll make fun of other Marines. The more I look at the cake, though, I'm getting a little disturbed by. I'm getting disturbed about the tip of the cake, which I heard is non-edible. But
Just
again, happy 247th birthday to the Marine Corps. And 3 more hours, we will. You guys won't remember it, but we're gonna like transition into Veterans Day, and that's super important. Like tomorrow, happy Veterans Day to all the veterans. And a lot of people, I'm gonna say this because I didn't realize it till today that people don't know it. So Veterans Day is not Memorial Day. Like we have to talk about what they mean. It's like tomorrow is Veterans Day. So tomorrow is where you celebrate all the people that have served. They came back. They wore their uniform for 30, 20 years, whatever. They're back. Tomorrow is not the day for Memorial Day. I'm not going to be bad. It's a different day. So it's hard to differentiate that for like, I think it's important. I get kind of irritated by it a little bit, but tomorrow is the day that we celebrate all the veterans. Like anybody that's raised their right hand, which is, I feel like I can still do it. I can still do it. But like it was a raised right hand, regardless of whether you served in war or whatever. But tomorrow is a huge day for all my brothers and sisters. Like it's a big day, and not for the Marines to overshadow it, but we have to continue to like they're like they're like children. You got to pat them on the back. Happy 247th birthday. Specifically, I have to say happy birthday to my favorite Marine, Ryan Barnes. I love you, my friend. You're my favorite Marine, even though he was an enlisted Marine reserves, and he actually retired as a Army colonel. So he saw the error of his ways, but he's my favorite Marine. I talked to him today and said, I love you. I do love you. Happy birthday, all the Marines. And then again, the lead up to it, I was absolutely making fun of you, but also I love you guys and gals. The Marines are pretty kick-ass. I wouldn't admit that, but everybody, happy 247th birthday to the Marine Corps, and then we're going to end it tonight. Again, why we're doing this as an organization is again to honor those the veterans that I'll say it again. I say it all the time, but made a bad choice. Suicide is not an option. We have to end this, and we're responsible for ourselves. So we need to stop it. And we're gonna honor a young Marine who took his life way too early. So tonight we're gonna honor on the Marine Corps birthday, U.S. Marine Corps Sergeant Tyson Ray Zalea, who was 31 years old. Tyson took his life on October 19th, 2019. Tyson was born May 3rd, 1988 in Alliance, Nebraska. Tyson was raised in Spencer, Iowa, where he graduated from Spencer High School in 2006. Tyson enlisted in the Marine Corps while still in high school, like Dave over there, right? Like many people. He served 8 years in the Corps, rising to the rank of sergeant. During his 8 years in the Marine Corps, Tyson deployed to both Afghanistan and Iraq. If you go on the internet and research him, Tyson loved to spend time with his family, in particular his sister, Shayna. I hope I'm pronouncing that. She actually, you should look him up. She wrote a really great letter to her brother, and you should really read that. I didn't want to read that tonight, but you definitely should look him up. He loved camping and enjoying making art. Tyson was an honorable, fun, and loving man, and was as reliable as they come. He was a handful of man, according to his platoon sergeant and fellow Marines that served with him. He had a gregarious personality, and in life, he had even bigger life stories. And what his old platoon sergeant said, all the life stories he told, a lot of them were crazy because they were true. So Tyson is survived by his children, Landon and Brooklyn, his parents, Shane and Diane, and his loyal service dog, Bits, who was always by his side until he decided to make a really bad choice. Again, if you're on the edge of making a bad choice, or you know someone that might be, definitely have them call the Veterans Crisis Hotline. You can dial 988, or you can dial 1-800-273-8255 and press 1, or you can text 838-255. And then one of the to continue to talk about this, I think it's important to try to get the professionals in, because I am definitely not a fucking professional when it comes to dealing with suicide. And I sometimes think I'm the last person you should be listening to, but that's fine. But one of our listeners actually talked about something that's local to Ohio. And as I researched it, I have a ton of time, but I think there is some way to do it in person and also via teleconference. But the Ohio State University College of Medicine, the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Science, has the Suicide and Trauma Reduction Initiative for veterans. It's called STRIVE. The program provides free psychological treatment for current service members and veterans for both post-traumatic stress disorder and suicidal thoughts and behaviors. So they're calling that STB now. I love how we have acronyms. I love how we're getting more acronyms. We have PTSD and now STB. I'm being sarcastic about that. They have a couple different programs. You can look at it. We will post the way to get into it on the thread, to their thread. I looked at today. You can sign up. I think you can sign up in person, or you can actually sign up via teleconference. They can still talk to you. It's an experimental program. It's actually run by a former veteran, so that's why I decided to talk about it tonight. So they have a couple different programs. They have the R&R program. The R&R program provides state-of-the-art psychological treatment for current service members and veterans experiencing symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder related to exposure to military and non-military related traumatic events. All veterans are eligible regardless of what era or your discharge status. So that's important. So discharge status, if you're of an honorable discharge, it doesn't matter. They want to treat you. And they also have the BCBT for suicide program. The STRIVE BCBT program provides state-of-the-art psychological treatment for current service members, veterans, first responders, law enforcement officers, dispatchers, firemen, and paramedics with a military history and their family who are experiencing symptoms of suicide thoughts and behavior, SCB. Like I didn't know there's another acronym until I looked that up. So we're going to post on the group how to get a hold of that, but definitely look into it. It's an experimental thing. It's run by a former veteran. I looked at it today, and it does seem like it's worth a shot if you're thinking that. And if you're in Ohio, it's definitely important to talk to professionals so they can try to figure out what's wrong with us. Is that a good way to say it? There's something wrong with us, obviously, if we're making these bad choices. So, again, everyone, thank you for tuning in tonight for episode 19 on the Marine Corps birthday. Again, happy birthday to the Marines. And most importantly, tomorrow we won't be on the air, but happy Veterans Day tomorrow. Tomorrow's a real day. You Marines, get some sleep.
The randomizer.
Oh, the randomizer. You want to talk about randomizer again? So I love their all. So tomorrow we will actually, like we talked about earlier, next week we're going on a barrel pick. Our second barrel pick for fourth of page. I love when they don't realize I have awful hearing and then I have headphones on. I can't. They're all like. But we're gonna do a barrel pick on Tuesday. We're gonna put up a randomizer. We're gonna have to make a small donation to the group. That donation obviously will be used to combat the suicide within the Army, Marine Corps, Air Force, all of our service members, and we'll put that up. It'll be up probably tomorrow. We don't know if it's 1 or 2 slots, depending on one of the members. It's one. He's saying one now. He's screwing you guys and gals, but it's gonna be one. You definitely want to be on this. I'll talk about this as good news. It's gonna involve lunch, limo rides, barrel picks, a great dinner, and fellowship, which I think is important for all of us. So again, as we close episode 19, Dave, thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing. Tonight is one of the hardest nights I've had. Thank you for sharing. From the bottom of my soul, thank you for feeling comfortable to share that. And again, everyone, thanks for tuning in for episode 19. We'll see you, I think, in a couple weeks. Hopefully. Actually, a couple weeks is Thanksgiving, isn't it? Maybe, I don't know.
It is.
So maybe a month. We'll figure it out. Let's look online. But thanks, Dave. Otto, you better buy your brother a good bottle of bourbon. And we will see you guys when we see you.